Evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of council, leadership team, and guests who are part of this agenda this evening. We're going to call the second regularly scheduled session of municipal council for the town of Tillsonburg to order at 6 o'clock. This is the 28th of March, 2022. Just a quiet reminder that would encourage all participants to remain both on mute and with the video off until it's their time to make a presentation or comments. At this point in time, I would call upon the clerk to take a roll call of council members present, please.
Thank you, Mayor Molnar. Deputy Mayor Barris.
Present.
Councillor Esseltine.
Present.
Councillor Govesi.
Present.
Councillor Luciani.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
And Councillor Bussart.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Recognizing we have a full attendance, 7 members of council this evening, and we'd like to start this evening's meeting by expressing our gratitude and acknowledging the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples. So personally, we are connecting today again from Tillsonburg, Ontario, which is an area of significance for many Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. Tillsonburg is located on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and is covered by the Between the Lakes Treaty Number 3 of 1792. So as we gather on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, dating back countless generations, we acknowledge the Ashinabek, the Haudenosaunee, and the Attawattaron peoples, showing respect for the long-standing relationships that Indigenous nations have to this land as they are the original caretakers. Thank you. We'll move to a resolution to adopt the agenda for this evening's meeting. Deputy Mayor, you have that, please?
I do, and I'll maybe make a footnote as per script, Mayor. Due to the notices being sent for this evening's public meeting applications, the public meeting items will be considered after the consideration of the adoption of the previous meeting. So therefore, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Luciani, that the agenda is prepared for the council meeting of March 28th, 2022, with items under the public meeting section being dealt with immediately following item 6 be approved.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Comments from council? Any questions? Seeing none, we're prepared to call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? That resolution is carried. With the agenda as now set for council agenda for the 28th of March, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof from the members present? And seeing none, we'll move to the adoption of council minutes of our previous meetings held on the 22nd of February, which was a planning session, and a regular council session of the 14th of March. And I believe Councillor Rosehart, you have that resolution, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Parker, that the minutes of the planning council meeting held on February 22nd, 2022, and the regular council meeting held on March 14th, 2022 be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rosehart. Discussion on those minutes, any errors or omissions? Again, seeing none, we're prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. As per the adopted agenda, we'll move to item 8, the public meetings portion of the agenda. And dealing with minor variance applications, we will be required to move into committee of adjustment. Councillor Luciani, you have that resolution, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Govesi that council move into the committee of adjustment to hear application for minor variance at 6:04 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Luciani. Discussion for members of council. We'll call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. The first application for minor variance is application A04-22. It has 2 sections. One is to reduce the minimum required rear yard projection from 9.8 feet to 8.9 feet, and to increase the maximum projection of an uncovered deck into the rear yard from 9.8 feet to 14.1 feet. And this is to facilitate the construction of an uncovered deck at 51 Fairs Crescent. The applicant is a Robert Wilmot, and we're prepared to listen to comment from planner, Mr. Gilbert, please.
Thank you. This is a minor variance application for a property at 51 Fairs Crescent. The property is zone R2-5. The applicant is proposing to construct an uncovered deck at the rear of the dwelling with an area of 238 square feet. The existing dwelling has a rear yard depth of 7 meters. The proposed deck will be set back 2.7 meters rather than 3 meters from the rear lot line. It's not anticipated that this reduced setback between the deck and rear lot line will have any negative impact on the amenity area of the lands or of the required lot grading and drainage. And a lot grading plan will be required as part of the building permit process. Given this, staff recommend the application be approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert. As indicated, this is a application under the Planning Act, and the process allows any person in attendance or who has made a request to appear before council in this planning application the opportunity to make presentation to council. If anyone who appeals this decision has not provided council with oral or written submissions either at or in advance of this public meeting, then the local planning appeal tribunal has the power to dismiss any said appeal. Are there questions from council to the planner, please? Seeing none, I'm aware that the applicant is not in attendance. I don't believe, unless there was a late amendment to that. And then I'd also look to the clerk to confirm that there were no registered speakers regarding this application.
That's correct. We have not received any registered speakers.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. We will move to the resolution, and I believe Councillor Parker, you have that, please.
I do. Move by myself and seconded by Councillor Rosehart that the Tillsonburg Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application file A04-22 submitted by Robert Wilmot for lands described as part lot 33, lot 34, plan 41M-182, parts 12 and 13, 41R 7077, town of Tillsonburg, as it relates to relief from table 5.37, 1, permitted projections into required yards, minimum setback between projection and lot line to decrease the minimum required setback from 3 meters to 2.7 meters, and relief of section 7.5.5.2.12.1 R2-5 zone, porch, balcony, deck, and step encroachments into required yards to increase the maximum permitted projection of an uncovered deck into the rear yard from 3 meters to 4.3 meters, subject to the following conditions. A building permit for the proposed deck shall be issued within 1 year of the date of the committee's decision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parker. To the resolution, are there questions from members of council, please? Seeing none, then we'll call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? That resolution is carried. We'll advance to our second application of minor variance this evening. This is application A05-22, and it's an application to reduce the required interior side yard from 24.6 feet to 11.8 feet and to increase the maximum projection of a covered deck in the rear yard from 4.92 feet to 10.2 feet to facilitate the construction of a covered deck at 7 Brookside Lane. The owner and applicant is an Evan Prose in the same conditions regarding the land tribunal exists this application within the Planning Act. Mr. Gilbert, you have comment, please.
These variances are being requested to permit the construction of a new single attached dwelling, 2-story in height. The dwelling will have an attached garage and attached covered porch at the rear of the dwelling. The town council did approve 2 previous minor variance applications in 2019 and 2021 to reduce the rear yard depth to 9 meters, subject to a standard condition that a building permit issued within 1 year. The previous applicants did not submit a building permit within this period, and the approval lapsed, and the lands have been sold to the current owner. The property is zoned R1 in the town zoning bylaw. The requested relief is not anticipated to have any impact on neighboring property owners or approve lot grading or drainage. And the town engineering department noted that no adverse impacts are expected to the operation of the Lindale Brookside Lane road, as it's a low volume local street, and the construction will be outside of the required site triangles. Staff opinion that the request relief is minor in nature, desirable and compatible with surrounding development, and recommend the approval subject to notice conditions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert. Are there questions for the planner from members of council, please? I don't see any. Thanks again, Mr. Gilbert. I had to my notice of the meeting that Mr. Prouse was intended to be in attendance to make comment on the application. Got a lot of names on my screen, so I'm just going to ask, is the clerk aware of Mr. Prouse's attendance?
He was registered to speak. I don't know if he is in attendance and maybe is using an alias name.
Yeah.
He's on the second page.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Counselor.
I'm here, but have nothing to say.
Okay, so Evan, I see you there, sir. You're prepared to answer any questions, though, that council may have,
Sure.
and agree with the conditions in the report. Thank you for your attendance. Members of council, do you have any questions for the applicant, in this case, Mr. Prouse? And seeing none, we'll move directly, thanks, Mr. Prouse. We'll move directly to the resolution. Is it Counselor Parker? Do you have that resolution?
No, it's me.
It's actually, we're moved past. I apologize. Counselor Govesi, thank you.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Luciani, that the Town of Tillsonburg Committee of Adjustment approves the minor variance application file A05-22 submitted by Evan Prouse for lands described as Lot 63, Plan 41M218, Town of Tillsonburg, as it relates to relief from Section 6.2 zone provisions, Table 6.2 R1 zone provisions, exterior side yard minimum width to decrease the minimum required exterior side yard width from 7.5 meters to 3.6 meters, and relief from Section 5.37.1 permitted projections into required yards, Table 5.37.1 permitted projections into required yards to increase the maximum permitted projection of a covered deck into all yards from 1.5 to 3.1 meters to permit the construction of a single detached dwelling, subject to the following conditions. A building permit for the proposed dwelling shall be issued within 1 year of the date of the committee's decision, and that the proposed relief shall only apply to the construction of a single detached dwelling and covered porch, the general size and location as illustrated on Plate 3 of Report CP 2022-116.
Thank you very much, Counselor Govesi. Once again, are there questions from members of council to the resolution is now on the floor? Seeing none, we're prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The resolution is carried. Thank you. Good luck, Mr. Prouse. And we'll move to the third minor variance application on this evening's agenda. This is application A06-22, and it's an application to reduce the minimum required rear side yard from 49.2 feet to 24.6 feet, and to reduce the minimum required rear yard depth from 24.6 feet to 14.7 feet to facilitate the construction of a new industrial building and silo at 3 Rose Street. The owner is Future Transfer Company Incorporated. Representing as agent is Objective Engineering Incorporated. You have comment, Mr. Gilbert?
Thank you. This is a minor variance application to allow for the construction of a couple of industrial buildings on an existing industrial property on the south side of Rose Street. The property is zoned special industrial zone, MG-2, which permits a waste transfer facility. The proposed new industrial building will have an area of 2,000 square meters with a silo as well for the storage and distribution of bulk products with a diameter of 27 feet and a height of 66 feet. The existing property is 5.7 acres in size and contains 3 industrial buildings. The easterly one, which is proposed to be replaced by the new industrial building at the same setback of the existing building. The property also contains a number of railway spurs and is used for the transloading of railway cars. The two provisions that are the relief that's being requested will facilitate the construction of the new industrial building to allow for some of the activities that have traditionally occurred outside to be occur within a covered building. As well, the silo will provide additional opportunities for the site and for the storage and handling of bulk products. The ability to locate the buildings in accordance with the bylaw is constrained by this site due to the shape of the lot, as well as the location of the railway spurs on the property. The proposal will be subject to site plan approval, whereby the existing site plan will be amended, and all matters such as servicing, lot grading, drainage, lighting, and stormwater management are required to be addressed to the satisfaction of the town and county. Given this, staff recommend approval subject to noted condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Are there questions from members of council regarding the application that the planner may be able to assist with? Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you. Through you to the planner. The acronym or the initial MG zone provisions. Could you explain what MG is, the long form, please?
MG refers to general industrial zone.
Thank you.
Any further questions from members of council that the planner may assist with? Seeing none, the applicants and the owner are in attendance. I'm just going to direct my attention to Mr. Perovich, unless there's an agent or other member in attendance that would like to speak to the application. Welcome, Mr. Perovich.
Welcome, Mayor.
Did you have any comments or just recognition of your support of the recommendations and conditions in the report?
No, I do support them and will abide by them. And we're just glad to have the opportunity to expand that facility now that we have rail back into it.
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks for I better get by the planning aspect and then make my comment on rail. Are there questions from members of council for Mr. Perovich? Seeing none. And Mr. Perovich, does that conclude any contribution from Future Transfer? No other representatives here tonight?
No, just myself, Mayor.
Okay, excellent. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else speaking to this? I'm just looking for confirmation for the public's awareness.
We had no other requests for this application.
Okay, thank you very much. And similar that if anyone who appeals this decision has not provided council with oral or written submissions either at this or in advance of this public meeting, the local planning appeal tribunal has the power to dismiss the appeal. And I think at that point in time, Deputy Mayor, you have the resolution, please.
This resolution is moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Parker that the Town of Tillsonburg Committee of Adjustment approve application file A06 22 submitted by Future Transfer Company Incorporated for lands described as Part Lot 1614, Plan 500, Part 1, 41R, 9736, Town of Tillsonburg, as it relates to relief from Section 17.2, General Industrial Zone Provisions, exterior side yard to reduce the minimum required exterior side yard width from 15 meters to 7.5 meters to facilitate the construction of a new industrial building. Part 2 is relief from Section 17.2, again, General Industrial Zone Provisions, rear yard to reduce the minimum required rear yard depth from 7.5 meters to 4.5 meters to facilitate the construction of an industrial silo building. Subject to the following conditions, approval is subject to an approval amendment to the site plan file TSPC 7-118.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Council, you've had a chance to review the report, heard the presentations and resolutions on the floor. Are there any questions? Then we're prepared to call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. Good luck, Mr. Perovich, to you and your team at Future Transfer. And your one comment, it is good to see rail advancing back into both this municipality and southwestern Ontario. So,
It's a big part of our business. We're glad it's back. Thank you very much to all of you.
we will consider moving out of the Committee of Adjustment and back into regular council. Councilor Rosehart, you have that agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councilor Bilisi. The council move out of Committee of Adjustment and move back into regular council session at 6:22 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. All those in favor? Opposed? That resolution is carried. Our final planning meeting found on our agenda under 8.4 is a consent application for land severance B2207-7 and a minor variance application A22-01-7. And it's an application that also seeks release from various entrepreneurial requirements to reduce lot depth and lot area, including a reduction of the lot depth from 98.4 feet to 82 feet on both the retained and severed lots, to reduce the lot area from 6,006 square feet to 5,435 square feet on both the retained and severed lot, and reduce the required rear yard depth from 29.5 feet to 24.6 feet on the retained lot. This is for a review of the application at property known municipally as 111 Rolfe Street, where the owner is Brother Marketing Incorporated. Mr. Gilbert, you have comment, please.
Thank you. This is a residential infill lot, or proposed residential infill lot to facilitate construction of a duplex. The lands are designated entrepreneurial district in the official plan, and they're zoned residential entrepreneurial holding zone in the town zoning bylaw. On the lot to be severed, there's a existing accessory building, and the lot to be retained is an existing duplex dwelling. The proposal proposes to split the property as a through lot from Rolfe Street to Valley View Lane, and the proposal is to split that lot in half and retain the duplex dwelling on the retained lands, and propose that new duplex dwelling be constructed on the lands to be severed with those minor variances that were earlier alluded to. And an easement for electrical servicing is also proposed through this application. The entrepreneurial district in the official plan permits a range of commercial and business development opportunities, as well as a mix of residential land uses. Low and medium density residential development is permitted within the entrepreneurial district. The maximum density is 13 to 25 units per acre within the entrepreneurial district. The residential entrepreneurial holding zone permits a number of residential uses, including an apartment dwelling, a bed and breakfast establishment, duplex dwelling, multiple unit dwelling, single attached dwelling, semi-detached dwelling, and street fronting townhouse dwelling. And the holding provision is in place to permit 3 units or less. If more than 3 units are permitted, then the application is subject to site plan approval prior to the removal of the holding provision. A number of comments were received from the agencies that were circulated the application. These comments have been included as proposed conditions of approval. The proposed easement is necessary as there is no overhead electrical servicing on Rolfe Street. The electrical servicing is from Valley View Lane. So the existing overhead service will have to be relocated and located underground within a required easement to service the existing dwelling on the lot to be retained. We did receive 3 letters of objection, including a petition from neighboring residents, citing concerns with a number of tenants within the existing duplex on the retained lands, as well as concerns with proposed density and parking. With regard to the analysis of the application, the proposal is consistent with the PPS direction to provide intensification, redevelopment, and opportunities for a mix of housing types and tenures. Both the lots to be severed and retained are considered appropriate in accordance with the infill policies of the official plan. This area of Rolfe Street and Valley View Lane has a mixture of lot sizes and lot types. As well, there are a number of the former through lots in this block that have been subdivided in the past. The lots on the north side of Rolfe Street exhibit similar setbacks, lot areas, lot depths and frontages and configurations as what is proposed. And these, notwithstanding the requirement for minor variances, the lot to be severed and retained will have sufficient size to provide adequate space for setbacks, parking, and vehicular ingress and egress. The proposal does comply with the ECR's zoning, with the exception of the lot depth and lot area for the severed and retained lots and the required rear yard depth for lot to be retained. And compliance with these provisions is not possible due to the overall depth of the existing through lot is only 80 meters. So there isn't enough space to provide, 50 meters. There isn't enough space to provide the required 30-meter lot depth. However, staff are of the opinion that these variances are considered minor, desirable, and appropriate, as there'll still be adequate space for required parking, area for drainage and building maintenance, and sufficient access to the rear yard will be maintained. The applicant has not requested any relief for required parking or required driveway widths. The applicant will have to provide that prior to the issuance of a building permit for the lot to be severed. It is the opinion of planning staff that the proposed severance is consistent with the provincial policy direction to promote intensification within service settlement areas. As well, it is consistent with the official plan policy for infill development in the entrepreneurial district and to promote residential intensification of the central area of the town, and staff recommend the applications be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert. And just in advance of opening the floor for questions from members of council, I just, you referenced in correspondence upon circulation from neighbors, did you say 2 letters or 3 letters?
There were 3 letters, sorry. There's 1 letter with a petition attached, and then there's 2 other letters that were received.
I'm just looking for confirmation either from do you consider the petition that has maybe 19 individual signatures on it to be one of a separate and distinct? I read that as being part of we, the undersigned, as coming from Mr. Komarami, who I know is in attendance and has opportunity to speak. And then I have documentation from an Anthony Thompson. Is there a third one?
There was a letter submitted by a Bryden Sinden. I believe that was also included, or
Okay, we'll continue on, and I'm just would look for clerk or deputy clerk to confirm maybe a page number in the agenda package where that correspondence is contained. I haven't got it in front of me. So questions from members of council for the planner, please. We'll start with Councillor Gavese.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Eric. So talking about required parking, so I'm assuming it's 1.5 spaces per unit. That would only be on the lot that's being severed where the new build is happening. That's where the town will have site control. Am I correct on that?
so the duplex dwelling would require 4 spaces for each, and they'll have to provide that for both the duplex dwelling on the lot to be retained and the lot to be severed.
Okay, so on the drawings, there's no parking provision. So I guess one of my concerns was when I was back there, there are cars parked at the back for that dwelling that's on Rolfe Street now. So essentially you're saying that parking requirements would be required by both, and you're saying 4 per unit, which is a total of 16 spaces. Is that correct?
So I know there's 2 per unit. So 4 per duplex.
Okay. And there's nothing on the drawing. So will that occur during site plan control?
That would occur prior to the finalization of the severance. You'd have to show and demonstrate that.
There's a number of large trees on that lot. Is there any type of program in place that has to replace trees that are removed?
To my knowledge, there's no prohibition on tree removal in town. So there's no required permits, so there's no required compensation.
Okay, thank you. If I may continue through you, Mr. Mayor, to Eric. Residents have raised some concerns, and recently in a proposed development package that we were looking at, intensification or basically any type of development should not, hinder or impede the surrounding area. So local residents are concerned about, number one, the lane back there is extremely narrow, really only 1 car can pass, so increased volume of traffic. Obviously, it's going to change the landscape a bit. So what assurances could we put in place to address these concerns? Or do you not consider them to be concerns at all, that you feel the development won't impede those things?
With respect to parking, the applicant will have to provide the required parking. They haven't submitted any relief of that. So prior to a building permit being issued for the new dwelling and prior to the certificate being issued for the severance itself, they'll have to show how that both pieces will comply with the zoning bylaw. With respect to Valley View Lane, it is narrow and it is pretty well built out to the extent it can be, given the narrow right-of-way in that area. We didn't receive any comments from town engineering staff or public works staff that they had concerns with the additional traffic that would be caused by the the new duplex. They'll have to show that the parking for the duplex is provided on site so that the duplex won't create or won't require on-street parking. So that will have to be shown, but I didn't receive any concerns from town road staffs or requirement for a traffic study, anything like that, to prove that Valley View could accommodate the additional traffic.
Okay, and one final question to you, Mr. Mayor, to Eric. So the engineering department made a comment that a preliminary lot grading plan would be required to demonstrate how appropriate lot grading and drainage designs can be achieved. So what if they can't? It's pretty flat. It's pretty flat in that area. And I mean, obviously we don't want to divert water, to neighboring homes. So what if a proper grading cannot be achieved?
If the condition wasn't clear, then the severance wouldn't go through.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from members of council? Councillor Parker, please.
Through you, Mayor Molnar, to Eric. Reading through the report, I didn't see anything from Tillsonburg Fire Services. Were there any concerns from Tillsonburg Fire Services about fire trucks getting down that road if we had more vehicles over there? Because there will be more traffic, and the way that things are going now, there will be more parking on the street as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Parker. The application was circulated to Tillsonburg Fire Services, but we did not receive any comments from them.
Thank you.
Just checking. Yeah, that you'll have the opportunity to ask that question though when resolution's on the floor. Councillor, was it Rosehart? Councillor Rosehart, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Eric. Eric, that is a very narrow street. It's almost like just an alley. And if you drive down there on weekends, if anybody's visiting, those cars are all parked that are visiting or on the road. There is absolutely no extra parking there. So with this building going up, there's going to be a lot of extra parking coming on that road. And I agree with Mr. Parker and Council Gavesi, the road crew and the fire department. I don't know how they would ever get down that alley if there was extra cars on there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Anything further from members of council? Just with a comment, the original report referenced 2 items of correspondence. The planner tonight indicated 3, and I appreciate that. I've gone through forward and backwards just now on my agenda, and I can't locate the 3rd. So either that needs to be circulated very quickly, or would encourage if we had it. Sometimes material does arrive post the authoring of a report. I don't seem to have it. I don't know if others have it and can reference a page number for me. I guess I'd also appreciate that. I did want to, with respect to, because the correspondence from neighboring property owners it is extremely important. And one had to do with, there was one of those 2, I think it was the first one. Excuse me. Currently, the property at 111 Rawl Street, which is this property, proposed to be severed into the back section onto Valley View, houses at least 7 male workers living in one side of an existing 2-bedroom duplex and an unknown number of people on the other side. I'll have an opportunity because I believe the individual will be speaking, but from a planning perspective, is there anything in that comment that gives rise to concerns with the zoning currently in this area of the entrepreneurial zone?
I did check with the bylaw department and they didn't have any records of any complaints or submissions about this property. To be honest, the number of people living in it, in the dwelling, only really matters if there's a different living arrangement that's more of a boarding house. And it's not necessarily a zoning issue, it's more of a building code issue that the living space would have to be brought up to the standard required by the building code. But from a zoning perspective, the entrepreneurial zone permits an apartment dwelling, it permits a multiple unit dwelling, permits a boarding and lodging house. So it's not so much a zoning issue as a building code issue in my eyes.
Okay. And I appreciate that. So now when referencing the entrepreneurial district, looking at non-residential uses in the EC zone, what are some typical non-residential uses that could appropriately be located in this geographic area?
Typical ones would be a medical office, a medical practitioner, could be a business professional office like a lawyer or an accountant. More like the typical office uses that fit in well with a residential neighborhood.
Okay. Are there any further final questions for the planner at this point in time? Councillor Esseltine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, Mr. Gilbert, so one of the requirements, I think in the 6 pieces there is deals with green space with, sorry, I had it written here in front of me and now I haven't got it anymore, but cash in lieu for, and so what would that cash in lieu be for? Like we see that a lot with subdivision developments and things, but where would the cash in lieu apply to residential development, individual residential development?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Esseltine. So the Planning Act provides that 5% of a land being subdivided, either through consent or subdivision, shall be dedicated to municipality for park purposes. It doesn't make a lot of sense to take 5% of each lot that's scattered across the town. So what the town has done is established a charge of, at this time, it's $4,000. That's payable once the severance is approved prior to it being finalized. And that goes into the town's parkland reserve to pay for either acquisition of land for new parks or enhancement of existing parks or play structures or a number of things like that.
Okay, so that would apply then to any new home being built, is that correct?
That applies to any infill severance where you're creating a new additional residential lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. And Council Esseltine and all members of council, just confirming that correspondence is referenced, correspondence number 3 from property owners at probably 113 or neighboring abutting property at Rolfe Street has been received. Anything further from members of council? And we'll proceed. Their applicant is in attendance, I believe, representing the applicant this evening. Is Jessica Adamson and or John Beldman speaking to this, or either separately or together, please?
Jessica Adamson. So yes, I am here and ready to answer any questions.
Okay. Did you have any presentation? Or just prepared to answer any questions?
Just kind of prepared to answer questions. Mr. Gilbert, I think, has covered it quite well. So I think we're ready for that.
Okay. We'll start with Councillor Parker, then I have Councillor Gavesi, please. Thanks for being here, Ms. Robinson.
Through you, Mayor Molnar, to Ms. Adamson. With the current building that's there, are the residents using on-street parking?
I don't believe so, but I would have to confirm that with them personally. I think a lot of them are using kind of the rear parking as well. So of course, as Mr. Gilbert was stating, we will be promoting and allowing for parking within the front lot as well. When I did drive by there though, a couple times, I've tried throughout the day, the front parking, there wasn't too much happening. So we hope to kind of, if they are using the rear parking more, to kind of promote them to use the front parking spaces instead of the Valley View lane as well. So just a comment there, but I'm not sure. I'd have to ask them personally at this point.
Thank you.
Councillor Kubasi, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jessica. Is this housing going to be like put on the rental market to the public?
We're not sure at this point if the severance does go through. We do have someone that is actually interested in the lot itself. So they could potentially, if plans go well, to purchase the property and do exactly what we're planning to do as well. If they don't purchase it, to just generate typical duplex in accordance with kind of these minor variances as well. But it's potentially, yes, it could go on for the market.
So if I may follow up through you, Mr. Mayor. So potentially you're selling, look, the lot may be sold before it's developed, but what are the intentions if the lot is not sold? Will the housing units be like available on the public market to rent?
Sorry, I think I misspoke. The house would be sold, but the property wouldn't. Sorry, I think that I got that question confused there. The property, like we would still hold the property, but the house itself would kind of be sold to a potential buyer. We wouldn't hold that, if that makes sense.
No, actually it doesn't, because I don't know how you would sell the house without selling the property with it. So
okay, so then yeah, everything would kind of be sold all with it as one. I'm not sure on the exact kind of like conversation that they've had with the potential new owner, but that's kind of just it is a possibility, but I'm not sure on that. That's a question for John that I can kind of follow up with him for that.
Just before we extend further opportunity, not to cut you off, Ms. Adamson, is Mr. Veldman in attendance tonight?
No, unfortunately, he's on a flight back home. So
okay. No, I didn't. I was going to, look for some mutual assistance, and then with nicknames and other things, sometimes it's just difficult. And he was also registered here. So, okay, appreciate that. Then we'll continue on with questioning for members of council. Councillor Esseltine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jessica, I hope you don't mind me asking this. Is this property a new property for you and or Mr. Veldman, or have you owned it for some time?
They've owned it for a bit now. I don't know exactly how long. I believe a little under a year, just a little bit over a year. I want to say, but I can follow up with the exact kind of timeline how they purchased it, but it's been more than a year, I believe.
Okay, so there was a prior owner who may have accommodated the large number of residents. Is that correct? I don't know that that's fair to ask, but
I'm not sure on how the tenants actually came about to be. I don't know if we kind of just inherited that or if they were just always there. But yeah, I'm not sure on that.
Okay, thank you.
I may help out on that issue. If you have the
who's speaking, please.
This is Laszlo Kamani.
No, you're a registered speaker, and we'll get to you. Same. You can either proactively make your response, so keep a note of that, or the counselor will come back to you and ask a similar question.
Okay, I was just trying to be helpful.
Yeah. And no, I absolutely appreciate it. I've got a bit of a protocol that I have to appropriate, especially in planning meetings, stick to. So thanks very much, though, for your opportunity for assistance. And Councillor Esseltine, perhaps put that little asterisk beside that, and Mr. Komarami can assist when we get there very shortly, I believe. Any further final questions from Ms. Adamson, representing the applicant? We will go to Councillor Luciani, please.
Through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Adamson. The existing garage that's on there, is that used right now for vehicular use, or is it just storage, or is?
At this point, there's mainly just storage within it. It's quite a small property. It's quite a small unit, so, and quite close to the property edge as well. So we're looking to kind of take that down and just have open parking instead, allow for a little bit more parking for the tenants as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? I had a couple of things, and then with Mr. Velbin not in attendance, I'll direct them to Ms. Adamson. I just want to make a comment that we are in a planning meeting. So there's going to be subjective approaches. There's going to be neighborhood histories. I'm not even saying this germane to this particular application, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with a planning matter and need to continue to focus on that. But there have been legitimate concerns relative to parking, responses that have not been, I would suggest, consistent relative to the future. People can make applications and then, in essence, sell that opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with that either. And I guess under the caveat that the municipality, as well as every other municipality in the province and our nation, has a shortage of housing. But until such time, and I should save some of this comment to final deliberation, is that the demand for housing needs to match good planning, and that includes the well-being of those who have invested in a neighborhood for in some cases for generations. So, did you have any final summary comments, Ms. Adamson?
Regarding to the parking, I don't know about, maybe the neighbors would have better concerns or better comments regarding the existing parking situation, whether they are parking more on the street or in the driveway. But whenever I kind of drove by there just to kind of see their tendencies, they tend to, I believe, park on the street as well, just because of the trees and just with the parking situation currently. The existing structure for the parking garage is quite small, so hoping to kind of accommodate that parking within the actual newly development as well. So we're hoping to kind of ease that parking on the Valley View Lane, but as you said, it's kind of just in a planning stages at this point. Thank you.
So my final thing with that, two parts. One would be there's an indication that there may already be some parking issues. Now we've got a application for consent, several lots, two actually, the value to that is that they're at least a similar lot size. And then there's a construction of a residential dwelling. How can we be assured that there's greater opportunity for parking when the net footprint is less because there's a physical structure occupying it, and additional residents are being introduced who have demand for parking on that same footprint?
Yeah, I believe, I don't know exactly how many cars can fit currently on the parking situation, so we would kind of look to elaborate on that. I don't know if we can propose anything like greater width or but we would of course promote for, as Mr. Gilbert was saying before, the 4 total parking spaces like 2 per duplex or 2 per units. And we would accommodate that. I don't know if we can ease anything on the Valley View Lane. I think that we would just kind of ease the parking within the rear of our current property, the 111 Rolfe Street, and just kind of the back area there. The driveway itself there is quite sloped and quite damaged. So we're hoping to kind of revitalize that area just to kind of allow for more spaces. There is a tree right in the middle of the driveway even. So hoping to kind of, again, maybe looking to plan to remove that just to kind of allow for more parking, but it's just a planning stages at this point. So we would have to look into that as well, see what's best.
No, I appreciate it. My final question then, would you, as the applicant to the team that's bringing forward this application today, be amicable to providing a draft site plan for review in parallel with any final deliberation on application for consent and zone and minor variant?
I have a master's in architecture, so I can create a plan for you to kind of allow for. I don't have it stamped if that's what you're looking for, but I can get also one stamped as well.
Yeah, with respect, you don't have it tonight and you didn't, and it's not part of your application. I realize that's not a requirement, but there's a lot of gray area here right now, and I'm trying to at least potentially provide you with some options that may not be available when the question's called. I don't have any guarantees of that. So just looking for your feedback. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Adamson. We'll move to additional speakers that have made applications through the clerk's office. One is I believe Laszlo Kamarami, and please help me, and I apologize, sir, who's the author of an email. Attached to that was a petition. And Laszlo, there he is, sir. Welcome, sir. Is in attendance. Please introduce yourself, register your address so the clerk has it on file, and then I'll just ask you to take the floor, please.
Thank you. My name is Les Kamarami. I live at 70 Washington Grand Avenue on the corner of Valley View Lane. Just to clarify the previous ownership, the people who owned the lot prior to the current owner is Paul and Bryden Sinden, who had entirely different people living in the building on the lot. And so things have changed since then. If I may, I'd like to read my comments. The bylaw being considered here today deals with how much land is needed to build on. So why should those requirements be curtailed or done away with in this instance? They shouldn't. There are good reasons for such requirements to stop overdevelopment, overcrowding, and overutilization. The property under consideration is now already overutilized, as I pointed out in my letter to the committee. Basically, my letter is saying that there are already too many people living on the existing property in the space provided. It is used as housing for working men jammed together in cramped quarters. The proposed development will greatly increase the potential problem of overutilization. The town of Tillsonburg has a webpage called the Site Plan Approval page. The first statement under the purpose of the approval process is to ensure that any development is compatible with the area in terms of character, use, and scale. I submit that this development is not compatible. Putting additional dense housing in this area would change what is currently a family-oriented small neighborhood. For us who live in the area, this is not just a paper exercise, just putting another line on the map. It will change the character of where we live. There's already plenty of high-density housing in the areas surrounding the immediate environments of this block. An apartment building to the north, 2 to the south, including the newly developed Rolfe School building, and 3 multi-residence buildings to the east. Is it really necessary to have more density right here? Isn't there plenty of space elsewhere? I'd like to point out that this section of Rolfe Street is on the Tillsonburg Historical Walk for a good reason. Because this and other downtown neighborhoods are a treasure to be valued and should not be exploited. The backyards belonging to these historical houses should be kept intact. You're being asked to override the laws governing lot sizes and allow someone to build a duplex house on a smaller than regulation lot where it wasn't intended. You wouldn't want this to be going on in your neighborhood, and as the signatures supplied to you attest, we don't want it in ours either. We respectfully request that you deny this application. That's my comments.
Well, very, very well. First of all, thanks very much and very well presented. And I can confirm that both your covering email and the attached petition are part of the record. I take this very brief opportunity to also recognize that the third piece of correspondence has been circulated. I'll reference that momentarily, but we will ensure that it's part of the minutes and all members of council are the opportunity to deliberate on that as well. For members of council, are there questions for the presenter, please? We will start with Councillor Parker.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Kamarmi, or sorry for the.
Fine, that's good.
With living in the area, what is your view on the parking situation over there? Are the residents of this area parking of this current dwelling parking on the road and causing increased traffic?
The problem occurs when there are visitors in the neighborhood. There are, for instance, today, there was trucks on the lane fixing the Rogers service in the area. With two large trucks, and people who tried to get by had a hard time and actually had to go on their own lawns to get by there. In terms of traffic, it's not bad now, but we're concerned about what's going to happen if there are additional residences on the lane.
Thank you.
Further questions from members of council? Seeing none, I don't think, but thanks very much, Laszlo, and we will be deliberating on that and taking your comments certainly into consideration along with the correspondence that council's received. We'll move to Mrs. Gleason, Frances Gleason, who I believe I see there. Represented here tonight on the screen as Fran and Brian Grayson. Fran, you are welcome. It's good to see you. Can you just confirm name, address, and then go ahead and make any comments you'd like to include, please?
Sure. I'm Frances Gleason. I live with my husband, Brian, at 113 Rolfe Street, the property just exactly north to the proposed property.
Very good. So continue. Anything that you'd like to say?
Sure. I have some notes. I'm Frances Gleason. My husband and Brian and I reside at 113, directly to the north of the proposed property. I would also first like to ask, maybe by show of hands, how many council members have actually come out to the neighborhood to view the proposed property?
Well, certainly. That very fair question, but I'm going to suggest council in their own deliberations have done their own part. So if they choose to respond, then I would ask them that they can do that independently.
Okay.
I'll take a poll of council regarding questions from the delegation. But thanks, Fran.
Okay. And first, I'd like to say that I feel that this is Mr. Veldman's commodity and it's not his home. We've lived in our home for 30 plus years. and our neighborhood is established, it's peaceful, and it's quaint. Mr. and Mrs. Sinden live directly south of the proposed property and have lived in their home for 53 years. They have a beautiful home, also on an oversized lot. Whatever happens with the Veldman property could essentially affect that property for further development in the future. To the west of the proposed property lives a young family that just purchased their beautiful home less than 1 year ago. They could have moved anywhere because they're from out of town, but they chose Tillsonburg, and they chose specifically Valley View Lane. Valley View Lane is basically a one-car lane. If you're driving your car and a car is traveling in the opposite direction, you have to stop until the car passes. For people walking, they generally move to the edge of the people's lawns until the car has passed. There are no sidewalks. Having a duplex in the area will bring increased traffic. The tenants that are in there now, they do park on the road on Rolfe Street. There's vans coming, going all day with workers. The tenants that were in previously, the one lady was there 20 years, and the other lady was an elderly lady. So that whole demographics have completely changed with what I feel is a over occupancy, definitely there. Mr. Veldman has owned the property for approximately 7 months now. I believe it will impact the value of my home and also my neighborhood. I have large windows at the back of my house, which looks into my backyard with views of Valley View Lane. I don't want that to change. I don't want a duplex in my backyard with Veldman's property with windows looking into my private backyard. I currently enjoy the privacy of my backyard. As I said, this is Mr. Veldman's commodity, not his home. I am very afraid of ending up with a building that is just north of Dave Bear's store. I've talked to several people about that building and no one's really sure exactly what that is, whether it's an apartment, a single home, a duplex, not sure. Further north, approximately 500 Broadway across from Petro-Canada, it used to be a single home. It now has a large duplex with three single car garages attached. The lady that lives directly north had a beautiful backyard, park-like setting, and she now has dozens of windows looking into her backyard. We've supported council when you needed to be supported, and now I feel it's our turn and we're asking you to support us. I am a hard no against this development. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Francis, and we appreciate your comments. Are there any questions from members of council for Mrs. Gleason, please?
Oh, and just to be clear, there is no front parking on that duplex. The only front parking is on Rolfe Street.
And yeah, the only, and one thing I would, I guess, spending time in about 3 homes in that area growing up. Growing up for me could be quite some time ago though, it is called Valley View Lane, which kind of gives a bit of an indication to its topography and its width, etc. So, again, we'll just a final call for members of council for any questions for Mrs. Gleason. Seeing none. I believe we're at the stage of introducing the resolution. This again is on application for consent and minor variance as originally highlighted by Mr. Gilbert. Councillor Luciani, do you have a resolution, please?
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Esseltine that the council of the town of Tillsonburg direct staff to advise the Oxford County Land Division Committee that the town supports minor variance application A22-01-7 submitted by Brother Market Incorporated for lands described as lot 747, plan 500 in the town of Tillsonburg as it relates to 1, relief from section 12.2, table 12.2, EC zone provisions to reduce the minimum lot depth from 30 meters to 25 meters for the lots to be severed and retained. Number two, relief from section 12.2, table 12.2, EC zone provisions to reduce the minimum lot area from 558 square meters to 505 square meters for the lots to be severed and retained. And three, relief from section 12.2, table 12.2, EC zone provisions to reduce the minimum required rear yard depth from 9 meters to 7.5 meters for the lot to be retained. And further, that the council for the town of Tillsonburg Council will advise the Oxford County Land Division Committee that the town supports the proposal to sever the subject property subject to the 8 conditions detailed in the planning report CP 2022-113.
Thanks, Councillor Luciani. So discussion from members of council to the resolution. Councillor Parker, please.
Through you, Mayor Molnar, to Chief Cascanet.
Yeah.
I was wondering what Tillsonburg Fire's position is in regards to the emergency services vehicles getting down Valley View Lane if there's more parking, on-street parking happening.
Fire Chief, are you available there?
Through the mayor to Councilor Parker, I'm not seeing Chief Cascanet on the line. I will reach out to him and we'll see if we can get him on the line. Maybe he had a small interruption. I apologize for that.
Thank you. He was online. He was online at the beginning of deliberations.
Any of the members attending the meeting who could be called at a moment's notice, it may be the fire chief. So yes, we'll continue to monitor that situation. And that was fair, Councillor Parker addressed that earlier. Did you have any additional questions, Councillor?
Nothing else from me.
Stretch it a bit. Councillor Luciani, please.
Through you to Director Reyes. Just in regard to that particular street, Valley Lane, is there anything we can do or anything has there been anything considered to try to mitigate some of the issues as far as the, well, basically the width of the road and the ability to move vehicles in 2 directions without having issues?
Thank you to you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Luciani. Unfortunately, no, there is nothing we can do other than what has been done at this point. These are really narrow right away. I think it's only about 8 meters wide, when a normal right away is about 22 meters. So it's a really narrow space that we had to deal with. And I think there's nothing we can do other than what already been done at this point.
Thank you.
Additional questions from members of council? I'm just checking attendance. Oh, thanks. See, we're saved by Councillor Esseltine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Gilbert. Eric, so there is provision here for the reduction of lot depth and lot area and things like that. And you have probably done this, but I just feel I want to ask, with those reductions and with the addition of 8 parking spaces, I'm thinking 4 for the front, 4 for the back, does that still allow for enough amenity space for 2 duplexes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Esseltine. With respect to the parking, there's also the option for the new dwelling of attached garages. Those could accommodate up to 2 of your required 4 spaces for the duplex on the lot to be severed.
Would
The-
that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The reduced lot depth in this, it really impacts probably your amenity area the most, the rear yard. Having said that, in a lot of new subdivisions, 6 meters is a typical rear yard now. So in my mind, the 7.5 that's proposed is probably sufficient. It'll certainly meet the required open space amenity area of the zoning. They won't need relief of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Just jumping back, because I wanted to give due process to the public comments that were arrived. And then again, recognizing that a third piece of correspondence was received from the residents at 105 Rawl Street above the signature of Bryden Sinden regarding something similarly referenced by Mr. Karamami, that they, meaning the Sinden family, had actually sold that property, as has been referenced in its acquisition by both the applicant this evening and by a neighbor. So we appreciate that third piece of correspondence. I had one quick question then, as a supplemental to what was addressed to the applicant. To Mr. Gilbert, a site plan, is it required? Or it's not included in these 8 conditions. Those conditions are primarily regarding the application for consent.
Typically, the driveway locations and size would be included on the preliminary lot grading plan, because that will show how the drainage will work and how the lot grading will work with the paved surface of a driveway area. So typically it's included in that. However, it's not, the proposed conditions don't include a separate condition specifically for parking. We've left it as the applicant hasn't requested relief for parking, so they have to provide it. That's how it's been addressed in the report.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. There are final questions for members of council? I think the reason I asked that question, there was beyond the general neighborhood concerns, which I take seriously from my perspective, and I suggest other council members do as well. It remains a planning issue, but as I respect and take into consideration those comments, I'm also going to suggest with a certain level of that the applicant was not really in a position to satisfactorily advance their own defense of their application. And that's concerning because it's about providing enough information that would actually tip the scales on why it is a proper thing to do, especially when there's a neighborhood concern. I've individually have certainly not been one. Housing, there is a crisis, as I mentioned. Infill lots are important because they're service. So there's even some items that, while respecting the positions of neighbors, I have concerns that and have stood alone on from time to time as well. But people do require housing and a safe, warm place to put their head at night. I'd be most encouraged that the council in any deliberation, I won't be supporting the application on the 28th of March. If there was an opportunity for the applicant to come back with additional information that could substantiate why they feel the applicant is appropriate, then I would may consider that at this time. It's also important to recognize that what the town, this council is doing is making a recommendation to an independent quasi-judicial body who will ultimately make a decision that they feel is based on the information that they have available. Zoom is coming up, at least tentatively scheduled in April sometime, Mr. Gilbert.
This application actually is scheduled for May 5th.
May 5th, okay. So just for the benefit of all in attendance. Okay, those are just maybe summary comments. The resolution as drafted appears on the floor. Are there any final questions from members of council? I'm prepared to call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is defeated. We will take a step back and we'll move back to item 7 of our agenda as we advance to the presentations portion. And it's a pleasure to welcome representing the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Tracy Arts. And I want to make sure that her patience has been good so far.
Yes.
Welcome. There you are. And you have others in attendance with you, Tracy?
I do. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to introduce, the floor is yours. You'll be speaking on homegrown campaign regarding farmland preservation, timely relative to the Oxford County's review of the agricultural official plan, and opportunity for some lower tier representatives to get a bit educated, but also ask some questions on your summary. So welcome.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me here tonight, Mayor Mulliner, deputy mayors and councilors. I'm actually going to introduce Hank Van Ruckel, who's from Oxford County Federation of Agriculture. He's going to start with some introductions and then I'll do my presentation if that works for you guys. Perfect. Hank, would you like to go ahead?
Yes. Hi, I'm Hank Van Ruckel. I'm the Vice President of the Oxford Federation of Agriculture. We are an affiliate association to the Ontario Federation of Agriculture.
Hank, I'm just going to, and I apologize, if Hank or any other individual is speaking, may I ask that everyone else, including myself, puts their audio on mute, and that Hank's will hear him and vice versa. So thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. So yes, we are an affiliate association then of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, the largest agriculture federation in Ontario. We are obviously trying to deal with problems on a local level and things that come up, and trying to work with municipalities on issues as they arise. We actually just had a really nice meeting with county staff on the official plan. So I'm here with Tracy Arch, who is director of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, who will do the presentation. And also on the call is Laura Fraser, who is the member service representative of the OFA, who usually would take questions from members and then distribute them to us. So the presentation is called Homegrown Farmland Presentation. And Tracy, go ahead.
Thank you. Now I have a slide deck to share. Do you want me to share mine, or do you guys normally do that for me?
Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk, can you assist Ms. Arts, and then we'll proceed. Welcome, Laura. Nice seeing you. And then we'll advance on the presentation, just confirming that it's been part of the agenda and all members of council have had the opportunity to review this.
Tracy, I've actually just provided you with permissions to share your slide deck.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I don't see it. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't see it coming up on mine. Is there any way you could share it for me? Sorry about that. I just don't see it coming up. I have the share button, but I don't see my presentation that's on my desktop here.
If you give me a moment, I'll bring up what you've submitted. One moment, please.
Sorry about that. Technology is great when it's working.
Just bringing it up now. One moment.
Thank you.
All right, should be good to go.
And you don't mind me telling you just next slide?
Yeah, not at all.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so like Hank said, my name is Tracy Arts and I'm the OFA Director for Elgin and Oxford County. Next. So the Ontario Federation of Agriculture represents more than 38,000 farm families. In Oxford here, we represent over 1,400 farm families, and in Elgin, it's over 1,100 farm families. OFA works to ensure the agri-food sector is included and consulted in any legislation that impacts the sustainability of our farm businesses. Next slide. In May of last year, the OFA launched our homegrown campaign. Our key messages focused on preserving and protecting farmland and food production. It was a digital campaign that was promoted across media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. In addition to those key messages, it also communicated the detrimental impacts urban growth has on our finite agricultural resources. Homegrown was a call to action for people to support the need to protect farms and food forever. The target audience is urban consumers, and to date, there are over 23,000 signatures in support of farmland preservation, and these signatures are largely urban. Next slide, please. Ontario's agricultural lands are finite, and they are a shrinking resource. We produce more than 200 commodities. Ontario cannot sustain continuing losses of agricultural land while maintaining our ability to produce food, fiber, and fuel. The 2016 census of agriculture revealed that Ontario farms encompass 12.3 million acres. That's less than 5% of Ontario's land area. If you compare the 2011 to the 2016 consensus, it showed a decline in the area farmed that's equivalent to 175 acres a day. For you football fans, that's 135 football fields every day. For me, that's 5 family farms a week. Ontario is losing some of its most productive agriculture land. That's classes 1, 2, and 3. When agriculture land is paved over or built over, it is lost forever. Next slide, please. Even though we occupy less than 5% of Ontario's overall area, agriculture and agri-foods processing are Ontario's #1 economic drivers. In 2019, Ontario's agriculture and agri-food sector, from field to fork, contributed more than $47 billion to Ontario's economy and supported more than 860,000 jobs. That's bigger than the automotive industry in Ontario. Decision makers must never lose sight of this reality when they're making decisions about future agriculture land loss to accommodate population and employment growth. OFA endorses the agriculture policies in the provincial policy statement, which state that in prime agriculture areas, all types, sizes, and intensities of agriculture uses and normal farm practice shall be promoted and protected. Next slide, please. The local planning process provides a framework for a balanced consideration of land use needs for agriculture and development. It allows our members and our local federations the opportunity to provide input on ag impacts. Yet, despite the existing provisions, the local planning process, we are still losing agriculture lands in Ontario at a rate that is not sustainable if our long-term food security and economic viability is to be protected. Minister's zoning orders short circuit our long established planning principles and policies. MZOs are short-sighted, and the OFA cannot stress strongly enough that we are not in support of using them to take farmland out of protection. MZOs prevents councils from having any say or the ability to appeal the MZOs. Next slide, please. Only 14% of countries in the world are self-sufficient and have excess crop production. Many countries are not in a position to meet their own domestic food production needs. Canada and Ontario are actually producing a surplus. This sets us up for a favorable export market for Ontario's agriculture goods, which is one reason why our sector is such an important part of Ontario's economy. We need these lands to remain in agriculture production if we are to continue to be the economic driver in Ontario's economy. The world's population is projected to rise to 9.8 billion by 2050, underlining the need to keep Ontario's highly productive agricultural land producing food for Ontario, Canada, and the world. The local planning process is a tool that helps to ensure that these lands are protected for this use. Next slide, please. We cannot continue to lose agricultural lands at a rate as 170 acres a day. OFA expresses deep-seated concern with the recent proliferation of MZOs that are being issued. MZOs eliminate the conversation around whether proposed growth can be accommodated through intensification, redevelopment, and in designated growth areas, particularly now that the requirement for compliance with provincial policy statement has been removed. The use of MZOs, as we've been seeing them lately, do not provide adequate framework for understanding the impacts of taking the land out of production. When these lands are left in agricultural productions, they have the potential to continue to produce food, jobs, and environmental benefits forever. That is not a potential to be overlooked hastily. Next slide, please. OFA makes the following recommendations to municipalities: fixed permanent urban boundaries for all settlement areas, the requirement for using existing green fields before new lands are designated, and an adoption of a broader province-wide policy to distribute urban growth more evenly across Ontario. Next slide, please. OFA believes providing advance public notice for MZOs and any amendments to them is important. MZOs weaken the local planning process by providing developers and municipalities with a workaround that could cause poor outcomes later. Next slide, please. Once a farm is turned into a shopping center or a warehouse or a subdivision, it will never produce food again. We lose the food, the fiber, or the fuel that was grown on that land permanently. I would like to mention Waterloo Region and their protected countryside policies. For decades now, they have been a leader in identifying key agriculture areas, developing hard countryside lines, and still growing their urban boundary areas in high quality sectors. They gain people's support by setting up a process that allows for a transition for better intensification. February of this year, the mayor of Burlington announced on CHCH that she was going to support farmers and no longer use farmland to build. A majority vote was just passed in February in Halton for no urban boundary expansion. I believe these are things we can strive to do here. Growth needs to happen, we know that. And we're working, but we can do that through working intensification and using existing buildings. Aside from food production, farmland provides an expansive list of environmental benefits to all Ontarians. Next slide, please. Once ag lands are taken out of production, ecological benefits like wildlife habitat, carbon sequestration, climate change mitigation, groundwater recharge are no longer possible on that land. These are benefits that benefit all Ontarians, not just farmers. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 pandemic has amplified the demand for local food production. Consumers are increasingly looking for locally grown produce, meats, and dairy products. Next slide, please. Bottom line here is we are down to less than 5% of Ontario's land base that can be suitable for agri-food, and all the jobs, economic benefit, environmental impact, and food security that the land can provide. Next slide, please. So I'd like to thank you all once again for allowing us to be here tonight to do this presentation. After tonight, if you want to get hold of me, I provided my email address, so feel free to get hold of me by that way. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tracy. And again, to the other members of the OCFA and the OFA who are in attendance tonight. Did Hank or Laura, did you have any additional comments that you would like to make before I open the floor to members of council?
No, nothing to add. Just that we always appreciate the open discussions that we have with you and council. So thanks for having us.
Well, it's nice having you here. We'll be doing this in person in the not too different future. And I know from personal experiences, the value that OFA has brought to SCORE regional economic development initiatives with your leadership and others at the OCFA. And the OFA, we've met as delegations historically, and that's always been a lot of the material is contained in here that we walk along that path together on. So are there questions for the delegation? I'll start with the Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Gavesi, please.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. Thanks for the presentation. And all I can think about is the Counting Crows and formerly Joni Mitchell, big yellow taxi paid paradise to put up a parking lot. And I see what you're doing, but I'm going to tell you something about the challenges. There's areas to grow. And first of all, they're saying now the recent census that 70% of Ontarians live in urban areas and 30% live in rural areas, and that's changing. So there are some challenges for municipalities, cities, and planning departments to grow. And the challenges are this. Number one, you daresn't use agricultural land. You daresn't use wetlands because we need the wetlands for water and for our wildlife. I mean, that's important to have those. So you can't build on those. I guess that leaves rock, and it's pretty hard to build on rock. And that's the challenges. It's not up to you to make those recommendations, Tracy, and your team, but it is up to us as municipalities to decide where this growth is going to be, because we have to accommodate this 70-30 split. So do we go up or do we go down or do we go north, south, east, or west are the challenges we have to make. So the only comments I'm making, and I don't have a question, and I apologize for taking your time, but I would suggest you add to your folder the strength of wetlands and how important wetlands are both to the environment and to the farmer because of irrigation purposes. We happen to live in an area of the earth which is very unique because we're surrounded by the Great Lakes and fresh water. We have properly harvested plenty of water for irrigation. And with the world population of nearly 8 billion people, somebody has to feed these people. We do have a 26-week growing period here in this part of the world, surrounded by the Great Lakes. And if that's harnessed properly, we're going to be in good shape. But we also have those other challenges that we're challenged with. So thank you for listening to my rant, and I really appreciate your input. It's important that we have this information when we make the decisions we have to in the future. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Gavesi, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions and I have some comments through Mr. Mayor to Tracy. You have a slide entitled Land Use Planning, and it talks about agriculture as a system, including the need for infrastructure and economic viability of farming. Who determines the definition of economic viability?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm just making notes here because I'll have to get back to you on that one because I don't know the answer to that question.
Thank you. With the loss of farmland, have you seen a corresponding reduction in food production? I believe you said that farmers are still producing a surplus, but has the overall production been reduced?
Farmers are very dependent on weather and all factors that hit us, right? So even though we're getting great at getting better at producing more food with less land, population growth is also a factor we're getting hit with. Our weather is becoming more extremes than we used to see, even from when I was a little kid. We didn't see these. Well, we just saw it. BC had a flood. Then Northern Ontario was in drought this year. So that's not an easy question to answer because there's so many factors that we deal with on a regular basis between environment and just less land to begin with. And even though we produce better crops from our seeds are better that way, and that's not an overly easy question to answer, because we are better at what we produce. We get higher yields from our crops, but we're doing with less. And we're also dealing with outside factors that we can't control any time of the year. So that's my best of my ability that I can answer that one for you. I hope that kind of answered it.
Thank you. I will say, in my observation, in what farmers have done in the last decade is really nothing short of a miracle, because they are producing higher yields, with less to work with, and it really is quite amazing. So I just wanted to make that comment. My other question would be, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Tracy, did the OFA discuss the root cause of the housing problem? So we have a housing crisis. So we sit here as a municipality who needs to see boundaries grow to address the housing crisis. So has your organization discussed what the root causes of housing may be? And maybe I'm going to throw one out there, just something that I'm thinking about is sustainable immigration. So obviously we're having pressure on urban areas, and they're moving and then moving downward and downward. Tillsonburg was, I believe, number 3 in growth. So when the census data came out, so I'm going back to, have you discussed what the root causes are?
I can't say we discussed what the root causes are. I do know we have a shortage in workers of about 29,000 people. We have more people, and I think the pandemic kind of amplified this. It was going to probably always happen in a way, but with the pandemic and people working from home, people learned that they didn't need to live in town where they work, because they could work from home. So they moved out to the country, right? It's nice. We all can appreciate that. I'd rather live here. This is where I live. This is where, well, I work because I'm a farmer, but people learned that they didn't need to live in town where they worked anymore, because they could work on Zoom, they could work from home. I think so. We saw that added pressure the last couple of years because people were moving out of town and coming out here. The other thing is our population growth has spiked. That was going to happen eventually anyways, right? You can only double and double and double, and that spikes. I mean, immigration, because we need workers in Canada, I don't know, that probably is a factor too, but I don't know if that's not the only factor that's hitting us with the housing crisis. We just are growing as a population. There's a lot of people here in the world anymore. But as an organization, I don't think we looked at the root cause of it. We're more of the planning of what to do about it, right?
Okay, thank you. So I do have a few comments, but I guess if we can't figure out what the causes are, it's hard to also find the solutions. So there's just a few things from my perspective. Number one, I feel it's unfair to paint all agriculture with the same brush. As you know, especially in the Tillsonburg region, we sit on the sand plain. Farmers have different restrictions than Northern Oxford with regards to crops and commodities that they can grow to protect the aquifer. Many farms that border adjacent to Tillsonburg were farms that were split between 2 townships. So they may be part in Tillsonburg, part in Swax, or part in the township of Norwich. The part that's in Tillsonburg has likely been developed, some of it for many years. The part that just straddles outside the edge of Tillsonburg are very small portions, 50 acres and less, 30 acres, 40 acres. In my opinion, they're not viable. I do have an agricultural background. So I think that, there's different factors that need to be considered. Also in your report, it recommends higher density development. I do believe that's happening everywhere. We can even see the intensification in Tillsonburg, apartment buildings, townhouses, row houses, mixed use subdivisions. That is occurring. My final comment would be, there's so many challenges. And I think one you stated was labor shortage, restrictive legislation, high fuel energy costs, excessive taxation, in particular, the carbon tax that's affecting farmers. Those are all ingredients that contribute to the decline of the farming industry. So it's so much more than just the removal of the land. There's all these components that are added into the mix. Also, I believe, I think you said you had 23,000 signatures, everybody. And I confidently say everyone in this room wants a safe and reliable food source. But is it up to us to decide what farmers should do with their land or to restrict their use? Thank you.
Further questions from members of council to the delegation? Councillor Parker, please.
Through you, Mayor Molnar, to Tracy. First off, thanks for your presentation. There's definitely a lot of information in there, especially with the environmental sustainability. I do agree with that. However, one of the questions that I have actually piggybacks off what Councillor Gilvesi just asked. You stated that you were 29,000 people short for employment in the agriculture industry. Right now, the latest data that's came out is that Ontario needs to build 1.5 million houses. So you need 29,000 workers. Where are those people going to stay if we want to make housing affordable at some point?
That's where the intensification and building up and that would come into play, hopefully, because we do need a spot to put them. Some of those workers are part of our temporary foreign worker programs where they come for, or the seasonal worker program where they come over for taking off crops during the summer season. But there is a shortage. And that's a potential of, I believe the figure was $1.5 million that we're losing in revenue because of the shortage of people were short to do the agriculture crops. So yes, we do need a spot to put them. There is a place that we need to fill. And that's where we're hoping the intensification and the building up is we're hoping to look at.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Follow-up comment. With what's going on, and I'm not sure if the OFA is aware, but Town of Tillsonburg does have the Boundary Adjustment Committee, which we're looking at a number of different areas to move to or grow the community, because we've had such great population growth. We are building up. We do have intensification on the radar of basically every development that we've done. It's something that still has to be looked at, and it's going to become an issue in Tillsonburg in the next 10 to 15 years, if it's not already. It's something that we have to address and grow now, because if we don't look at it now, we're not going to be able to get it done in a short order. So it's a long process for boundary adjustments. But we have a number of farmers that are outside of the town of Tillsonburg that have reached out to the Boundary Adjustment Committee wanting to be a part of Tillsonburg, because they're looking to get out of either the farming or they're looking for more residential uses. So that's my thoughts and opinions on it. And thank you for your presentation.
Are there any further questions or comments from members of council? Seeing none, to Tracy, to Hank, and to Laura, thanks again. The one thing I would pick up on, there's still time to make comment. A couple of questions remain unanswered. The best way to potentially answer them is to advance research and feedback to the official plan review that was kind of extended or still laying in transition through Mr. Michael's office. Certainly Mr. Gilbert here can assist in that. And I know there's been correspondence from the Oxford County Federation of Agriculture relative to the County of Oxford's official agricultural plan policy. when we were referencing the need for infrastructure and economic viability of farming, to the point that I would address that, I said, expand the support that you have, the definitions you use, and then ensure that not all rural opportunities are associated with food commodity, seed and watering and harvest. Appropriately zoned lands for that rural economy. There's so much new and greater opportunity as well. I know that's part of it. The greatest material in the presentation was probably the last page. Attract and retain youth. Because that talks about families. That talks directly to why SCORE EDC was formed in the first place, about having equitable opportunity for the next generation of farming families and youth, that they can go anywhere in the world to follow their dreams, but they should never be prohibited from staying at home and carrying out those dreams in the environment that you're fortunate and blessed to lead us in deliberations on. So there was no question there, other than some general support and understanding that from my position, there can be no greater focus than doing what we can do collectively for the next generation and the youth of our area in Oxford County and Southwestern Ontario. So, Tracy, did you have any supplemental or final comments?
No, just thank you very much for having us here tonight and being able to do this presentation.
Well, I would suggest it was very excellent, and we look forward to any return on any other different topics as well, because I know there's a lot of advanced work that the OFA and the OCFA are bringing that benefit all community members, both rural and small urban. Councillor Esseltine, you have a resolution regarding the presentation as made this evening, please.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Barris, that the presentation from Ontario Federation of Agriculture entitled Homegrown Campaign Farmland Preservation be received as information.
Thank you. Any additional questions to the resolution from members of council, please? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, resolution is carried. Again, Tracy, Hank, and Laura, thank you very much. We look forward to our next opportunity to review this material. Our second presentation this evening, is representative of the Water and Wastewater Service Delivery Review. And in attendance this evening, I want to make sure that yes, welcome, Mr. David Simpson, the Director of Public Works for Oxford County. Also in attendance, welcome on behalf of GM Blue Plan Engineering, Andrea Clemencio. I saw, oh, there you are, Andrea, welcome. And Jim Harnum, Municipal VU Consulting. And if there's other members with your party, please don't hesitate to extend introductions to them. And I think at this point, the one I know the best is Mr. Simpson. I'll turn to you, and then maybe you can direct the presentation as you see appropriate.
Thank you, Mayor Mulliner. If I might ask Deputy Clerk Wright, if you would mind sharing and advancing the screen, that'll probably be the best use of everyone's time.
I think that was what was provided to me was a PDF. I can bring that up if you like.
Thank you. Perfect. Thanks very much, Deputy Clerk Wright. Again, Mayor Mulliner and members of Tillsonburg Council certainly appreciate the opportunity tonight, joined by representatives from GM Blue Plan and Municipal View, to present a high-level overview of the Water and Wastewater Joint Service Delivery Review. Again, this was a review that we did to look at the specific water distribution and wastewater collection service provisions across the county, which also included services that are being currently provided within Tillsonburg and Woodstock. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview. I don't need to really cover that off. You can read just as well as I can enunciate that slide, but I'll be just introducing some brief background before turning it over to Andrea and Jim. And then I'll circle back at the end of the presentation just to help out with kind of where to go from here in terms of next steps. So next slide, please. So again, just before I introduce the consultant team who undertook the service delivery review, I wanted to provide some background to council regarding the Oxford water and wastewater systems. As you can see here under the Municipal Act, Oxford County holds the exclusive municipal authority and responsibility for all water and wastewater services. That includes the water distribution and wastewater collection systems that Oxford County already owns. And in our current service arrangements with our service providers of Tillsonburg and Woodstock, they actually operate the county system within the urban jurisdictions of Woodstock and Tillsonburg under service provider contract agreements. Next slide, please. So just for those of you that may not have been as close to the project team as a lot of the members, where this is just a little bit about the process in terms of how the service delivery review became to be. It dates back to a report to County Council in 2021, where we were fortunate to pursue municipal modernization program funding. That funding was awarded by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in June of 2021, at which point the county and its two service providers, Tillsonburg and Woodstock, looked at developing a joint service delivery review request for proposals. So we did seek and receive review and comment by the area municipalities regarding that terms of reference before it's released to market. Subsequently, we received submission bids in September of 2021 on the RFP. We had a RFP evaluation committee formed by County, Woodstock, and Tillsonburg staff, which ultimately recommended the award to GM Blue Plan and its subconsultant, Municipal View Consulting. So we basically worked in concert with the Public Works teams from Tillsonburg and Woodstock since that time. The joint service delivery final review report was completed by March 23rd. So it's currently in an information report form, and was subsequently circulated to the area municipalities. Actually, I think it didn't quite make it on the 24th, but it got circulated earlier today to both Tillsonburg and Woodstock. Next slide, please. So at this point, again, I'll hand it over to Andrea Clemencio from GM Blue Plan, and then Jim Harnum from Municipal View will be covering off the back end. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council and staff. As David introduced, we are here just to walk through the report, the assignment that we carried out to help provide some basis of the information that we were reviewing, the objective of the overall assignment, and where we've landed and why. So we thought it'd be helpful to start really with what the objective, this was taken right from the original request for proposal that David mentioned. And it's important to make sure that this is understood by the group. Our objective was to determine the most appropriate and cost-effective way to provide both water distribution and wastewater collection services. And the cost-effective piece is one part of it, but it couldn't just be a fiscal review. We opened it up, as you'll see, to be greater than that. And we had this focus on the last line of making sure that service levels were considered. This includes maintaining current service levels or improving them. And that inherently means starting with defining what those service levels are. Next slide, please. So across the top there, the boxes just show the general approach that we took to this assignment. And most importantly is the orange box on the top left. We had consultation with the staff and stakeholders from all of the municipalities involved, from Town of Tillsonburg, City of Woodstock, and County of Oxford on several occasions, as well as a deep dive into the data that was provided. We moved towards trying to define current state, because without really starting with a definition of what the baseline is, or what is, what are the operations now and how do you define those, we wouldn't be able to do a fulsome model evaluation. So then we moved into looking at what these service models could be. What are the alternates that are available for provision of these services to continue? And then finally moved into the recommendations at the end. And the list below it is just to show, like I said, it's not strictly a financial review. We, both Jim and myself, come from public works. We were both former leaders in public works. We live and breathe water and wastewater and have for most of our careers. And we wanted to make sure this was a fulsome review, legislation, service levels, governance, looking forward in terms of forecasting and sustainability of these services. We considered the customer experience and overall risks, pros and cons, and then finally the financials. Next slide, please. So levels of service are an industry term that you hear a lot, especially in the asset management world and the municipal world. And coming to some agreement on what defines a level of service is quite an undertaking. This is a small sampling of what we identified as some of the indicators of the level of service to the community. And we honed in on this particular table in this slide because these ones really are where a lot of the comparable data could be retrieved or analyzed from all three parties. So we're looking at things like hydrant maintenance and inspection by closed circuit television of the sanitary sewers, inspection of maintenance holes, operating or cycling valves in the water system. And we started with those because they have defined industry best practices that are reference material. So there's a good starting point to say, what does the industry say is a good service level or a best practice service level? And then start with that as a baseline to consider what the municipalities are operating at. Next slide, please. We also wanted to make sure we were considering the full breadth of what water distribution and wastewater collection services include. So, of course, frontline operation, the actual frontline staff operating, maintaining and monitoring the assets and the systems, but as well, all of the other responsibilities that come with the operation and maintenance of these systems, from engineering, planning, policy requirements, customer service, billing, and then a host of compliance and drinking water quality management you're aware of with your training, backflow enforcement, and so on. We dove into all of these areas to make sure we were considering everything from a service provision point of view. Next slide, please. The final report provided has some metrics for comparison that have been reported on, as I said, to start defining current state. Where are we at today? Not so much to pit the operating authorities against each other, but more to assess and be able to define and quantify what these service levels are. And this is just an indicator of one of many metrics. On the water distribution and wastewater collection side, we gathered the data of the total kilometers of main and in a ratio with the number of frontline staff. This doesn't include supervisory staff. Where we were able to come up with these ratios of really kilometers per operator for each of the operating authorities on the water and wastewater side. It helps give us some reference of the responsibilities and the kilometers that are allocated, and also an indication really of the staffing challenges across the groups. Next slide, please. Also in current state, we took that a little bit further, and using the operating budgets that were provided from the municipalities, both actuals and budgeted operating expenditures were analyzed and indexed again to the kilometers of both water and wastewater systems, again, as indicators and metrics to help us start understanding the operations and the challenges that are found within all three groups. To compare and to gather and collect all of this data together, it starts to tell us a story. We start to understand a little bit more without just a fiscal analysis. So you'll see here Tillsonburg Water being the highest operating expenditures per kilometer. And then next would be Woodstock and Oxford. And then in the green, we've got wastewater. Next slide, please. We also heard throughout the workshops, and we had technical memos that were generated and provided to all of the parties throughout the assignment to get regular feedback and commentary as we went, just to make sure we were using the right data and making the right assumptions. And one of the comments was about making sure we were considering not just the kilometers of water main as an index, but also the customers, the customer base, since we recognize that a kilometer of water main in an urban area is quite different than rural. So we did an analysis of the operating cost per customer. This would be per a water meter account for all the three municipalities as well. Next slide, please. The overall objective here is to make sure that we're considering this trade-off that happens in all municipal operations. And we understand this is applicable in operations, in asset management and planning. You as council and staff are always trading off between these three elements: a level of service to the community, a cost to provide that level of service, and an acceptable level of risk. And you're making the decisions that swing your trade-off point depending on where you choose to land. You have the opportunity to save money, or to add cost, to change level of service, or to change your acceptable risk level. And this concept provided the basis of the report and the discussions about the options to go forward. Next slide, please. I'll hand that over to Jim.
Great. Thank you, Andrea, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So I'm going to speak to you for a few minutes about the three models that we explored. We developed these models in consultation with the three municipalities, Oxford, Tillsonburg, and Woodstock. The first model is having Oxford operate all of the water distribution and wastewater collection systems. They operate several of them now, and the only two they don't operate is Woodstock and Tillsonburg. Model B would be having the water distribution and wastewater collection assets actually transferred to Woodstock and Tillsonburg, and have them be the owner and operating authority as opposed to just the operating authority. And the last model was looking at having an external agency not only operate Tillsonburg and Woodstock, but all of Oxford's water distribution and wastewater collection assets. Next slide, please. We'll get into a bit of the objective comparisons, and then we'll talk a little bit. And these were the things that Andrea talked about at the beginning, where we didn't just look at the financial and the bottom line. We looked at what could each of these models offer. So model A, refreshing your memory, is Oxford operating all of the systems, all of the distribution and collection. So what we found here, and not only our opinions, but discussions with the parties, that this aligns the accountability with the responsibility. So it allows the owner and the operator to be the same person. Oxford does have experience operating other water distribution and wastewater collection systems. There was a more appropriate supervisory level and span of control. The span of control was quite small in Tillsonburg and Woodstock with respect to supervisory to operators. So this model allowed a more appropriate supervisory and span of control. The economies of scale in the admin and the overhead were spread across a larger area. So you end up with economies of scale there. Currently, the drinking water quality management system is carried out in triplicate. So there's 3 operating authorities, and under the legislation, you need to do the drinking water quality management system for each of those operating authorities. We saw that Model A offered some redundancy and reduced risks in the overall responsible operator and the operator in charge roles. And these are designated roles under Reg 127 under the Safe Drinking Water Act. It offered better coordination on the long-range asset planning. We felt that it would offer equally good customer service as Oxford was already carrying out this customer service in the other municipalities. Would, however, require a detailed transition plan for Oxford to take over the responsibility of operating these assets. It would also require Oxford to learn the systems. Tillsonburg and Woodstock are very familiar with their systems and their customers, and they've been doing that for quite some time. However, we felt that this could be mitigated if some of the staff were to come over to the Oxford model. Next slide, please. Model B, similar, assigns the accountability and responsibility. So you would have, again, the owner and the operator being the same individual, the same entity, I should say. Oxford or Woodstock and Tillsonburg do have experience operating the water distribution and wastewater collection system, so that was good. We felt that would be equally good customer service to Model A. There will need to be some additional technical and administrative resources to address the role as owner. So again, this is where some of the differences were. When you become the owner of the facility, you have to have staff to do some of the other responsibilities that currently Oxford is carrying out for Woodstock and Tillsonburg. We did see a loss of economies of scale in the admin and overhead. The smaller you break these things down, you have supervisors supervising smaller groups, and you lose that economy of scale on the admin and the overhead. You're unable to spread that over a larger area. The DWQMS, or Drinking Water Quality Management System, would still need to be carried out in triplicate. So there's a loss of efficiency there. There's numerous further studies that would be required for this to happen. You can't just transfer the asset. There needs to be application to the MECP. There's legalities around that. We would need to look at successor rights. We need to look at asset valuation. We need to look at all of the issues around transferring those assets and making Tillsonburg and Woodstock the owners. This did have the highest capital costs. This is estimates of the capital costs, mostly to do with the studies identified above, and thus these are one-time costs of approximately $575,000 to $825,000, and those are detailed in the report. Next slide, please. Model C comparison. Again, the outside agencies, whether it's Aqua or Veolia's or OMIs of the world, operating entities, they do have experience operating water distribution and wastewater collection systems. This model does allow for some transfer of risk and responsibility. Whenever you hire a contractor to do something, you put a contract in place and you transfer that, you pay for that risk. So back to that triangle that Andrea described, what you're doing is you're paying for the transfer of some of that risk to a contractor. However, there is a profit motive that could have a negative impact on assets, where a contractor is can be focused on profit as opposed to the well-being of the assets. A detailed operating contract and lengthy RFP process is required for this to happen. So without a good contract, the contractor will find holes in that operating contract and look to increase their profitability. So you need a very detailed operating contract. You need someone to to manage that operating contract. And in order to have an open and transparent process, you need a very detailed RFP process. We'd also need a very extensive transition plan, as it would include not just Tillsonburg and Woodstock, but it would include all the other municipalities in Oxford. Any changes, this is another drawback that they've seen throughout Ontario, any changes in legislation cause the potential for extras. So if the legislation changes, the contractor says that wasn't in our original contract, and there's a potential for extras there to be levied against the contract. This was also the most disruptive to staff. So we would see all of the staff either transition to a contractor or some other approach taken with the staff, and wasn't part of our scope to explore that. But this was definitely the most disruptive. And again, one of the main things you have here is the loss of knowledge in operating water distribution and wastewater collection systems. So you lose all of that knowledge, and now you're somewhat at the mercy of the contracts going forward. The next slide, please. Well, you'll see here there is the status quo baseline. So this is from the 2020 budget. When we started this project, the last budgeted and actual dollars that we had was 2020 dollars. So the status quo right now is $5.67 or $5.7 million to operate all of these systems, distribution and collection. Model A, and I'll get into some of the assumptions, but Model A, we're seeing a price of approximately $4.6 million or a $1 million savings, or 18% reduction if we were to go with Model A. Model B, we're seeing a $487,000 increase or a 9% increase in total operating cost, and I'll get into some of those reasons. Then Model C, we didn't do as in-depth a financial analysis on Model C, because not only were the groups not really seeing this as a viable option, but we also saw some larger risks with this option. But we did estimate about a $850,000 increase, or a 10% increase in the cost. You'll see here, the last one is called Status Quo Plus, and this is interesting. So we didn't start with this Status Quo Plus as one of the options, but Status Quo Plus is really how can we improve the status quo and do some of the initiatives or best practices that would see the status quo actually improved. So although that wasn't one of the models we started with, part of our RFP and part of our assignment was to look at best practices. So we analyzed those best practices, and we came up with a costing of those, and there was trade-offs. Again, back to that triangle of risk and level of service and cost. So it's roughly about the same amount of money as the status quo, but you end up with improvements in services. You pay for those improvements in services through efficiencies that you found through your Status Quo Plus. Next slide, please. These are the best practices that were identified, and the first is backflow prevention as a user fee. Currently, one of the municipalities has a backflow prevention program that is carried out by staff, and we feel that best practice throughout Ontario and Canada is to have this as a user fee, so businesses pay for this service. Standard service levels, you saw the chart that Andrea presented. Right now, Woodstock, Tillsonburg, and Oxford have different service levels in their levels of turning valves, inspecting manholes, flushing sewers, and so on. So standardizing those service levels where one municipality may be doing something better than another municipality, but going with the best practices and standardizing them and allowing those savings to be spread across the three municipalities. Looking at continued joint procurement, there is some joint procurement now, specifically in the roads area. Looking at further joint procurement. Potentially collapsing the water and wastewater reserves. We have a lot of reserves that we analyzed are in each municipality that create peaks and valleys when we're doing capital projects. So collapsing those water and wastewater reserves into one for water and one for wastewater for all of Oxford County. Again, joint procurement, sorry, that's their second time. Capital, we just wanted to stress that point, that joint procurement is important. Capital coordination in the right of way. So ensuring that we're doing this now, but we think that we can do a better job coordinating the works that are happening in the right of way. Looking at inflow and infiltration. So looking at rainwater that's getting into the system that causes a cost to treat. You have to treat that rainwater at the treatment plant. So looking at finding better ways to remove that inflow and infiltration into the sewers. And then looking at full cost recovery. So going through all of the service levels and all of the services that Oxford and Woodstock and Tillsonburg charge for, and ensuring that we're getting full cost recovery and none of those services are being subsidized. We'll go to the next slide, please. We then thought, let's put this on an ease of implementation and benefits scatter plot, where we have up in the highest corner, we've got the highest benefit. It's difficult to implement. And then in the bottom corner is the ease, bottom right, is the easy to implement, lower benefit. So where you want to have, you want to start with is the highest benefits in the green and the easiest to implement. So we went through a rating system, and it may be hard to see on your screens there, but it is in the report that looked at 3 areas of ease of implementation, the time to implement and the cost to implement, and the benefits, which were cost savings, customer experience, and service levels. So we rated all of those and we plotted them on a scatter plot. Next slide, please. These are the ratings where we came up with not only the risk that we identified, the pros and cons, also the benefits and the ease of implementation. We see Model A as being the easiest to implement with the highest benefit. That's both cost and service level. Model B is number 2. We've seen that as one of the least favorable because it had the highest cost and there were some introductions of risk there. The status quo plus is number 4, and there was quite a bit of discussion around number 4 and why is number 4 not higher than number 1? Really what number 4, the status quo plus, is the combination of number 5 to 11. All of those things to be implemented would cause number 4 to be implemented. So again, I'll reiterate that number 4 is a compilation of all of the best practices, which are number 5 to 11. So those do take time. So that's where it's scored lower on the ease of implementation, and the benefits were not as high collectively because there was pros and or pluses and minuses that cut that back to $5.7 million. So there wasn't a real cost savings implementing number 4, but there was improved customer service and improved service levels. Next slide, please. So we did come up with a recommendation that an alternative service delivery model to the status quo was recommended for consideration, which most optimally balances the water and wastewater systems operations level of service, cost, and risk, which was the triangle that Andrea pointed out. Next slide, please. So our recommendation is that Model A offers the most advantages with the least number of disadvantages and risks to the county and its citizens. It's recommended that Model A be further pursued as a preferred model to deliver the water distribution and wastewater collection services in Oxford County. Model A, to refresh your memory, involves the County of Oxford assuming full operating authority responsibility for water distribution and wastewater collection in Tillsonburg and Woodstock, and continuing as the operating authority for all of the other municipalities. And that the county continues to own all of the assets in this regard, and the contractual agreements with the town of Tillsonburg and the city of Woodstock would not be renewed. This is our findings. And again, David will talk a little bit about this in the next slide. There's much more work to be done through the discussions with the CAOs and the staff at the staff level. And my understanding is further staff reports will be coming forward. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Just in the interest of time, Mayor Muller, we'll just kind of wrap up with a next step slide here and then open the floor for any informational type questions. So again, just so council's aware, we were mandated by MMH to publicly post the joint service delivery review report. So that's already posted as a condition of the funding. Obviously, we're carrying on with our ongoing review of the joint service delivery review final report findings and recommendations. You may not be aware, but the respective CEOs from the county, Woodstock and Tillsonburg, have been discussing next steps. I think they actually met this morning, if I'm not mistaken. And my understanding is that the respective area municipalities will be reviewing and maybe preparing local reports on the service delivery review findings by the end of May 2022 back to County Council. So as county staff, we're certainly just waiting to receive that feedback from the area municipalities and any reporting that we might receive in that regard. Obviously, we'll be further considering the consultants' independent service delivery review recommendations. And then all of that is intended to be compiled to a staff report back to County Council, and I'll update the date here as per a recent amendment at County Council last week. The April 27th date would now be a June 8th, 2022 date, where we intend to have the staff report back to County Council with a preferred service delivery approach, at which time we would invite GM Blue Plan and Municipal View back to present to County Council as well. And that's basically where the final deliberations on the service delivery approach would conclude. So again, we're here tonight in the spirit of collaboration. As much as the Tillsonburg Public Works staff has been involved in the project, we felt it was important to extend the presentation out to Tillsonburg Council tonight. And yeah, if anyone's seeking any more clarity on the information contained on the service delivery review report, obviously we've got Jim and Andrea here tonight, just respecting that any deliberation of the report findings that will occur at County Council. So on that, Mayor Molnar, I'll pass it back. Thank you.
No, that's excellent. Thanks very much, Mr. Simpson, and through you to the other presenters here this night, Andrea and Jim. Very comprehensive information. Important that there's an opportunity to provide some material time here for council to ask any questions for clarity. And I understand there's a resolution as well that we'll deliberate on in the near future here this evening. So questions for any of the presenters? We'll start with Councillor Parker, then I go to Deputy Mayor Barris, please.
Thanks, Mayor Molnar. My first, I have a few questions here. The first questions will be directed towards Jim and Andrea in regards to the presentation. Tillsonburg has 47.3 kilometers per operator for water and 163 kilometers per operator per employee for wastewater. However, the cost for the town of Tillsonburg is more per household. Is this because of the population size, or what is the reasoning behind that cost?
I'll take that if you like, David.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple things that we discovered through the process is the town of Tillsonburg, in our opinion, does not have enough operators. So the operators are quite low, so that's why you have so many kilometers per operator, and that's not really sustainable. And part of Model B was a discussion with Tillsonburg staff that they would require additional operators to make themselves sustainable. What they're doing in the meantime is a lot of contracting out is happening, so that's been driving their cost up to meet those service levels and meet their obligations. They've been so they have a higher contracting out per kilometer than the other two municipalities do.
Continue, Councillor.
Thanks, Mayor. Follow up. Also, it was mentioned numerous times about increased service levels if option A was selected. However, as a councillor, one of the biggest challenges for people in the municipality is deciphering what is the responsibility of the county and what is the responsibility of the municipality. So even if we went with option A, the town of Tillsonburg would still be fielding calls and dealing with stuff like that. Is there opportunities or ways that you would suggest to alleviate those kinds of questions? Because I can say we already have that with garbage collection, which is at a county level.
And I'll pass that over to Jim or Andrea.
I'll take a stab at it. I think one of the things that we're looking at here is actually streamlining with Model A recommendation and streamlining the accountability. So everything to do with water and wastewater would the county. So there definitely need to be a transition plan, and we did identify that in the report as some of the next steps. There would be a learning curve. And there would be communication protocols and quite a bit of communication required with the public before you would try to reduce those calls, nuisance calls for sure.
Thanks, Jim. I guess the last question that I have would probably be directed towards Mr. Simpson. If option A were selected, where would all the employees be housed? Because right now they're spread between Woodstock, Tillsonburg, and the rest of the county. Would there be a set area inside each municipality, or are they going to be based out of Woodstock near the county offices? Has any thought been put into that? Because there's a capital cost to housing all those employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Through the mayor to Councillor Parker. Certainly any facility requirements have been considered. That certainly would be part of that detailed transition plan in the event that was the direction County Council chose to follow. It would look at optimizing existing sites that we already have in place across the county. So it does not necessarily mean we need to run out and build new operational yards or new facilities. It would be optimizing and utilizing facilities we already have in place.
Okay, thanks all.
Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Simpson. So this report is good. It's very good. It brings out what we need to see and where the expenses are in the county. But what it doesn't show us, David, is the revenue side. And I just want to ensure that everyone in Oxford County is being treated equal. And I get it. This report would be in the hands of Oxford County primarily, most of it, for any of the models above. And that's fine. But are we paying more than our share? And what I'm getting at here is what we talked, your consultants talked about the reserves, that you would take the reserves and spread them out equally. Is that justifiable? Where's the rationale for taking the reserves that our homes, our businesses, and our industry has built up by paying an equal amount of water or sewage or wastewater rate as they do to the freshwater rate? And then that's taken, I hate to say it, but from the golden goose and spread out to the other areas of the county that maybe didn't build those reserves. And I feel it might be a Robin Hood effect, and it's really not fair to our ratepayers that are purchasing the water.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Bears. Certainly, I'll let GM Blue Plan or Municipal View speak to that in a moment with respect to the revenues. I can affirm revenues was part of the financial model consideration that was put together throughout the assignment. I believe in terms of the reference to the reserves, currently right now, it's just simply listed as a best management practice. Whether or not County Council seeks to pursue or implement that best management practice, I obviously can't speak to that at the staff level, but it is a potential service model that is readily employed by a number of larger municipalities. Perhaps, Jim, if you don't mind, you could speak to the revenue aspect in terms of how that was addressed within the financial analysis.
I'm not sure, Andrew, if you had anything to add there, or did you want me to go ahead?
Sure, go ahead, and then I can add.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's it exactly. We were asked as part of our assignment to look at best practices, and there are different needs in different municipalities. If we treat Oxford County as one system, and on the treatment side they are one system, on the distribution and collection side there are three systems. So if we treat them as one system, leveling out the reserves doesn't take from one municipality and subsidize another. It shaves the peaks and valleys. So it can reduce the potential. And again, this is it's just what we're identifying as a best practice, but it's totally up to county council and yourselves to make those determinations. But we were asked to look at other municipalities and decide and offer, I should say, some of the best practices that are happening throughout Ontario.
All I was asking for was the rationale of what was fair. And I don't believe I got that answer, and I don't believe I'm going to get that answer. I believe this may be in the best interest of Oxford County for all the ratepayers within, or the users within the county. And I just don't want to be the one that has to subsidize that with our ratepayers here in town.
Certainly respect the comment, Deputy Mayor Barris. Thank you.
Anything further, Deputy?
No, thank you very much for your
No,
response.
no, very good. We'll go to Councillor Kovesi, please.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. I would concur with the deputy mayor. The ratepayers from Tillsonburg, I think, believe have amassed over 18 point some odd million dollars, and I looked into it on the wastewater and water reserves. And also keeping in mind, Tillsonburg ratepayers paid a sewer surcharge for a number of years to build up those reserves. Thanks.
Any further questions, comments? Probably had a little bit of additional time. I'm not going to spend, thank you again, Mr. Simpson, for it's very comprehensive. And the other team members were meeting for the first time. Remind us all that this is an independent third-party consulting approach to some of the information, and at this point in time, until it's either peer reviewed and has additional analysis that would and indeed warrants that's the extent of the information, until such time as it's actually been ratified or adopted by a lower tier, and ultimately, as Mr. Simpson indicates, the County of Oxford by the council at that level. And I say that in respect to a lot of the information, even a couple of questions asked relative to the HR capacity of either the various three options. We're dealing with people here as well as a water and wastewater system. I'm not going to ask all the questions. The recommendation, someone can maybe help me with that, and it's probably going to be direct my question through to Mr. Harnham. In our model, in our opinion, excuse me, Model A offers the most advantages and the least number of disadvantages. And then it continues, and risks to the county and its citizens. So it's risks to the county and its citizens. I'm going to lead or ask for a little bit of an extended interpretation of what that entails when we're really reviewing two independent service delivery systems in partnership with the County of Oxford.
I can take that if you'd like.
Well, anyone who can answer it. Mr. Harnham was the one who read it, so I was just turning to him. But yeah, Andy, thanks very much.
Sure. Through you or to you, Mr. Mayor. The risk evaluation that we did really was quite broad. We were looking at any sort of risk analysis when we're considering financial, reputational risk, environmental impact, compliance or liabilities, and more. We were, it's difficult when you're trying to compare risks related to the various models, because the risks can be incurred by the various parties. So in general, when we had to land on a recommendation, we wanted to make sure that we were looking not just at the risks to first and foremost the county as the owner of the assets, but also included the citizens. So we included consideration of risks in our evaluation that talked about risk related to private property and citizens and so on. So it was a fulsome review, starting with the risk to the county as a corporation from an asset ownership point of view, but as well as risk to the citizens.
Can you define citizens? Are we talking 68,000 citizens or 118,000 citizens?
We're talking about all of the ratepayers within all of the water and wastewater systems.
So the 3 urban, 5 like in the rural, and including the fact So not independent to the modernization funding and the rationale for this particular overview, which is what this is about. It's about Woodstock and Tillsonburg delivering service. But now it's been extrapolated into the entire citizenry and stakeholders of the County of Oxford. Am I correct in that then?
Perhaps, sorry, Andrea, perhaps I
Go
could
ahead.
jump in there, Mayor Molnar. Again, the intent of the review was a tri-party review for the entire county system, which obviously included the two service areas within Tillsonburg and Woodstock. So I think in answer to your question, we're talking about the complete 120,000 residents of Oxford County.
Yeah, but anyways, I appreciate that. Thanks, Mr. Simpson, and thank you for being probably more accurate in the population, because you deal with that operationally on a regular basis. And thanks again for that and all you do. No, I think for tonight, I'm not going to expand a great deal. There's a definite been a tone to the consulting approach. I look forward to direction here tonight. The ease of implementation benefits, if I was going to make one final subjective comment, is I'm moderately surprised that 1 and then 2 and 3 in what is potentially a positive partnered resolution to a service delivery review would fundamentally be so separated on the ease of implementation line. And I realize that axis represents much more than partnership, but there's a fundamental separation between 1 and then 2 and 3, which I would have thought the spirit would actually have demonstrated they would have been much closer together. So those are, it's very good dialogue, and I think the questions from members of council and to David, Andrea, and Jim, thank you very much for your presentation. I'd ask maybe through you, Mr. Simpson, did you have any summary or final comments that you'd like to share on behalf of the group?
No, I think the presentation covered it accurately. Just again, appreciate the opportunity to be present with council and doing our best just to keep everyone well informed of the proceedings.
Thank you very much. We will advance then to consideration of the delegation. I believe Councillor Govese, you have a resolution, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Parker that the presentation from Oxford County regarding joint water and wastewater service delivery overview be received as information, and that staff be directed to prepare a report for council to be brought back no later than the second regularly scheduled meeting in April, recognizing the time sensitivity of this issue with regards to the following: financial costs to the town if option A gets adopted by County Council, which should include severances and job losses. If option A, as recommended in this presentation, is adopted by County Council, how would it affect the local water and wastewater rates? Thirdly, staff recommendations on preferred option outlining pros and cons of options, including status quo. And finally, if option A is adopted by County Council, how will local service levels be affected? May I speak to that, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you.
Just quickly, I do believe that the town needs to take a position on this. I also believe from a town perspective, we don't have the required information at this point in time to make that decision. And furthermore, I also believe there's going to be cost to the town if option A is chosen by the county. Thank you.
Any further discussions, deliberations, comments from members of council? One general question is support the resolution. I would look for a concurrence from our leadership team, whether that's Mr. Reyes, Mr. Pratt, is because there were actually bullet points listed. I would have anticipated that these are the type of things that would have been in any comprehensive report. So I applaud that they're in here, but I would hope, I'm looking for a confirmation that because they were included in here, that this is not the full extent of any comprehensive report, and that our leadership team will be kind of giving us their proactive and independent feedback as well. That hopefully is just a very quick response.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Mayor. So reading or listening to that resolution or motion on the floor, everything seemed fine. The only thing that jumped out to me was the quick turnaround, given the other priorities that are on the table. This morning, I had a meeting, as noted, with the CAO from the county and the CAO from Woodstock. And, we were talking about providing some information, and my timelines were more around June or July. If to the extent of my involvement, I would call on Carlos to provide some comment on his availability with his priorities as well.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a really tight time deadline. I think we only have about a couple of weeks to provide this report and upload it on eScribe. So I will suggest that maybe we prepare that report for the first meeting of May, if that is possible.
Councillor Govesi, please.
Thank you. Okay. I just want a clarification that everything has to be back by the end of May, correct, to the county?
The amended resolution as adopted at the County of Oxford, which was looking for this to be returned and advanced, and that's if the town was wanting to make comment. Thank you very much to the leadership at the county who understood the municipal partners based on the presentation tonight have a general interest in providing positive input. And the resolution as adopted at council was that forward information to the county by the end of May. So I would think first meeting of May, and then if we're not entirely happy, it gives you the chance to kick the one additional kick at the gut, or maybe something in that report. I don't want to prejudice the report because there's two partners, actually three partners in this. So and maybe our leadership team have been meeting more than we have.
So I can amend it to the first meeting of May, but that's an absolute firm first meeting in May.
I will accept
Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I will accept that amendment.
Okay. That's what the resolution reads then. And Madam Clerk, you'll be able to incorporate that in the second part of the resolution?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution's carried. Thank you very much. If the Andrea, Jim, and David, thanks again. I know I think you're still there. You're always, of course, welcome to spend the rest of your evening with us. But again, thank you very much for your presentation and importantly for your responses. So item 7 in our presentations and delegations has been completed. We've also have completed section 8 as far as our planning documents and our public. There are no planning either reports or delegations or deputations. COVID-19, are there any questions or comments? Any requirement for updates from any members? Some brief summary comments is that as of today's date, actually the amount of Omicron and total cases have escalated again since just 1 week ago. But I think actually, as of today's date, the Reopening of Ontario Act, which was the act put in place and then extended on a number of occasions because the provincial government had the capacity within inside the act to extend and then extend and then extend. That's actually now expired as of today's date. And that effective the 27th of April, all remaining measures, directives, and orders will officially end because it's a 30-day moratorium since the ending of the Reopening of Ontario Act and the conditions contained within it. I would just encourage everyone to continue. We're still sharing material online, Southwest Public Health, swpublichealth.ca. And I think in addition to that, the next available local vaccine clinic is at the Tillsonburg Community Center on the 31st of March, this later this week, between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. And actually, they are also extended as walk-in clinics now, making it even easier than in the past when appointments needed to be made. So very brief, but positive, commitments so that we're beginning to enjoy a little bit of the benefits of being responsible to our neighbors. Anything further on that, we'll advance through to informational items. There's correspondence from Minister Smith of the Ministry of Energy and from the Wind Concerns Ontario organization regarding setbacks from wind turbines. And I believe it's Councillor Parker who has a resolution.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rosehart. The council receives the information items from the Minister of Energy dated March 17th, 2022, and the Wind Concerns Ontario dated March 8th, 2022 as information.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion. Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. We'll move to the departmental reports under corporate services. There's an accessibility policy update. Councillor Luciani, you have that resolution, please.
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Esseltine that council adopts the updated accessibility policy and the work accommodation and safe return to work policy.
Thank you, Councillor Luciani. Discussions from members of council. Councillor Gervaisi, please.
Couple quick questions through you, Mr. Mayor, to Corporate Services Department. I'm not sure who the actual author is of this. Looks like the clerk. There she is. I saw that this went to the Accessibility Committee. Did the Accessibility Committee put together a motion in support, or did they provide any comments?
We reviewed the policy with them at a meeting, and they were generally in agreement with it. There were a couple of suggested changes that they wanted us to make to that, so we've incorporated that into the policy. But there wasn't a specific motion to adopt it.
Okay, thank you. And then I noticed that the policy is for volunteers, council, all staff, employees. How, number one, is this communicated to everyone, and is there training with regards? Because I think one of the first comments was that this policy has completely changed compared to the old one.
Yeah, so the policy has added two other standards to that. So we absolutely, once this is adopted by council, we'll need to do that training with staff and council and our committee members. So this is the first step in the process, and we'll make sure that everyone is trained on the new policy.
Thank you.
Further from members of council? Supportive of the report and the recommendations. I've got one, it's a concern or at least an observation. I believe what I've read in the policy header is it's reviewed on a 5-year next scheduled review in 2027. I'd very much encourage that something as substantial, significant, and important and changing as an accessibility policy should be reviewed every 4 years. So every mandate of council has the responsibility, more than anything, to have input and feedback. So it's nothing entirely supportive, but from 22, as a matter of fact, the next council would maybe not even need to review, and I just think it's that important. That's all. I don't know if if there's a comment from the author or if there's others who might consider that an opportunity to at least amend the review period.
Yeah, staff can certainly incorporate that change if that's what council would like to do. That provides a guideline actually for all of our policies, but we can absolutely do that in advance of the 5-year, especially if legislation changes, which it normally does with accessibility. So we can absolutely change that to 4 years.
Okay, do you need direction on that? Who was moving? Councillor Luciani and Councillor Esseltine, are you able to add a caveat and that the policy be reviewed on a 4-year period?
Yeah, I'm good with that. You can read that council adopts the updated accessibility policy and the work accommodation, the safe return to work policy with further review every 4 years.
Okay, properly moved by the mover and seconder to that amended resolution. Is there any final discussion? We'll call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. We'll advance to the vaccination policy, the second report under corporate services this evening. Councillor Esseltine, you have that resolution, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Barris, that the COVID-19 workplace proof of vaccination policy be rescinded.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk, or in this case, the Director of Corporate Services. I apologize. Questions from members of council? Thank you. First of all, thank you to our corporate team. Thank you for council for your leadership in a difficult time and trying to balance various priorities and putting I believe, a responsible position forward that met, options and challenging times. But I would just echo the author of the report that staff will continue to reinforce Southwestern Public Health's message and quote that vaccination is important as it is the strongest defense against COVID-19. So anything further to the resolution? Deputy Mayor, please.
Quick question to the author through you, Mr. Mayor. Would this take effect immediately? Would we have to have a bylaw to do this? Are we going to follow the federal to make it like arrive can effective April 1st? Do we have a date? Or are we okay to do it effective tomorrow just by resolution?
Yeah, so it would be effective as of tonight's council meeting, so that we would message that first thing tomorrow morning if that is approved.
Thank you.
Further, then we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolutions carried. Thank you. We move to economic development. There's a surplus land declaration in Grandview Drive right of way. Councillor Govesi, you have that resolution, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Luciani, that the public road Grandview Drive described as parts 2 and 3, Plan 41R 9064, be declared surplus to the needs of the town of Tillsonburg in accordance with bylaw 2021-031, including suitable notification to the public, and that a bylaw be brought forward for council's consideration.
Thanks, Councillor. Discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. And final under economic development, tree planting agreement with Long Point Regional Conservation Authority, and appropriately will let the deputy mayor read that resolution, please.
Thank you. I suppose it's because I'm the representative on Conservation Authority. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Parker. The council approve a tree planting agreement with the Long Point Region Conservation Authority for the lands described as parts lot 1 and 2, concession 5, north of Talbot Road, more particularly described as parts 14 and 15 under Plan 41R 8326, and located south of the Stormwater Management Pond in the Van Norman Innovation Park.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Discussion? The only question I could have circulated, I just, between the author of the report And then I guess looking for alternative sites, probably in RCP as opposed to development park, where the same stock, or I guess really I'm talking about is a percentage of the stock. Can it be used? Is it value somewhere else as well in the community?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. Could you please clarify what do you mean by stock?
Well, the seedlings, the stock.
Oh, thank you. Are you asking the Conservation Authority would have the ability to provide other, I guess, seedlings?
Well, other, or we're basically saying we're going to commit to this in partnership, and we have to be stewards of XYZ for, have we looked at other sites where we could use the benefit of this investment?
No, Mr. Mayor, that has not been considered.
Okay, no, I'm not wanting to complicate things. I just, trees are always something we hold valuable. That's good. So anyways, good initiative. Anything further from council? Deputy Mayor, please.
I just want to comment that the locations here, I'm supposing, from my knowledge, has a great deal to do with erosion control, as opposed to just planting trees, which is important. I mean, trees are great. But erosion control in those particular areas are needed probably more than is just in an open field area. But there's always room to make or have discussions with Long Point as far as forest management to see where we can go with other groups. There's some great buying power with the Conservation Authority on buying trees and planting them compared to member municipalities and Long Point Conservation Authority. They're a good partner to have when it comes to tree planting. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolutions carried. Excellent. Thank you very much. And we move to departmental reports under Interim Director of Finance. Councillor Rosehart, you have a resolution regarding the 2021 annual investment report.
Thank you. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Leahy. Council received report finance 22-07 2021 annual investment report as information. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. Call Deputy Mayor, please.
I seem to be taking a lot of limelight, but this is rather important to me. Just recently, and I look at the investment percentage here. Recently, I've just read as of today, February showed an increase in cost of living of 5.7%. And it's expected to be in greater than 4% across Canada by the end of 2022. And that's a projection that's probably small. It's a smaller percent. And if we're looking at investments, we're actually losing if we consider the value of the dollar shrinking. Now, guaranteed investment certificates are good, but if they're controlled by the banks and this new proposed legislation of any corporation making over $1 billion a year are limited to what they can do. Inflation may take guaranteed investment certificates up, but the banks may keep it down. And if I were a bank, I would, because of the profits. You'd want to keep them within intact. And I'm assuming, and I don't have a copy of our policy here for the town for our investments, but we probably have a PPN policy, which is provincially protected notes. So they have to be very safe to what we're doing here with this, but there's also a considerable amount of money. My point is, I just hope staff stays on top of this and watches it, because we could see some interest rates in the Bank of Canada rates within the next 30 days increase as much as a half a point. And if it is, what's going to happen to the guaranteed investment certificate as compared to the inflation value? So I think this is something we should just really consider and ask our staff to stay on top of this. It's happening, and we don't want to have money sitting there that are actually losing for us at the end of the year, where based on the cost of living increases.
Excellent. Anything further? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That resolution is carried. There was a previous report and now a confirmation to revision to the rates and fees bylaw. Councillor Parker.
Yep, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Esseltine. The council approve a bylaw to amend the 2022 rates and fees bylaw with revisions to the transit advertising fees and the utility labor fees.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution's carried. As a side note, it'd be nice to find a way to amend one line in a very large, comprehensive and exhaustive fees bylaw and not need to have the entire bylaw brought back every time with some of those fees that have been there for a decade. But anyways, I guess the resolution was straightforward. Nothing under fire and emergency services. There's a sign variance reconsideration at 262 Broadway. Councillor Govesi, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Parker that council approve a variance to sign bylaw 3098 to permit an animated LED sign of 1.11 square meters be incorporated into a proposed new ground sign within a neighborhood commercial zone to be located within 9 meters of a residential use and increased area of 5.11 square meters located at 262 Broadway, lot 998, plan 500. And that's just to make one comment, Mr. Mayor, that's just verifying that that is option 2.
Clarity, is it the same as what the resolution was? The circulated resolution.
Yes, I didn't change it from what was.
No, it's just what you said. I just sticking to my script here. Excellent. So as circulated, as recommended, and as read. Anything from members of council? Call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. Thank you, and to the building department as well. Under Recreation, Culture, and Parks is the tender results for Lake Lisgar splash pad. Councillor Luciani, please.
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Barris that council award the contract for RFT 2002-004 to Yard Weasels Incorporated. I'm not too sure that was 2002 or 2012, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a contract with Yard Weasels Incorporated of Fergus, Ontario for the construction of the new Lake Lisgar splash pad in the amount of $417,500 exclusive of applicable taxes.
Thank you. Discussion for members of council. Start Councillor Luciani, please.
Just a couple comments. One, it's great to see that the RFP has been out back and we've got somebody in the wings ready to build something that we're actually going to see people into maybe before June. I do want to just bring up one point though, that this has been one thing that the Accessibility Committee has been looking at for a while. And we did have some issues initially. We still do have some issues maybe as far as timing. But the reality of it is we did have a meeting last Thursday. This was again reviewed by the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and a motion passed then by myself, seconded by Margaret McCrinnan, that the Accessibility Advisory Committee has reviewed the Tillsonburg splash pad project and endorses the new splash pad and will continue to review the project regarding issues of accessibility moving forward. The committee itself has no real issues. I'm just speaking on behalf of the Accessibility Committee as the rep there. The committee has no real issues with the project as it is tendered. We do have some concerns possibly, and maybe just looking maybe a little further than we need to look at, but until it's in, there may be some issues that we are identified, so we do want to keep our eyes there. Thanks.
Further questions? Councillor Esseltine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Baird. So this company, then it's costing us $417,500. Will this be the company as well that will finish off the splash pad, like by adding the fountains and all of that sort of thing? Or will there be somebody else involved in that part of it?
Okay, that's a great question, Councillor. Thank you through the mayor. This company, the contract that is before you this evening is to construct everything. The only other component, you may recall a few weeks ago, we did get council authorization to proceed to purchase the actual spray devices. Yes. Those devices, we were concerned about cost escalation and availability and so on. So those will be on hand and will be installed by this firm. We just wanted to be preemptive so that there were no unnecessary delays. We really want this open for for June, the start of the warm weather.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Further questions from members of council? Thanks very much, Mr. Beard, and to Mr. Drobich as well. Did you, Madam Clerk or the Director of Corporate Services, either one of you, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to clarify that as per the mover, it should read, the resolution should read RFT 2022-004. Just wanted to make sure I made that clarification.
Okay, thanks very much. And or we're really behind the times here. So thank you to Mr. Baird, Mr. Drobich, your entire team, and community for being a valuable part of the process. The one question I have is, it's not germane, excited to move forward. This was one moderately smaller portion of the overall aquatics facility investment being made between the municipality, the province, and the federal government. And this would, what are we investing? $1.3 million in total. And we're now eating up 417 of a commitment out of, in essence, out of the 5 million though. So do we pay the 417 in the same ratio and then get reimbursed by our senior partners, or how do we, maybe it's more of a question for the interim director of finance, or it's not going to change anything, but it's an interesting cash flow analysis.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm glad to answer that just for Renato. So the town has previously approved in the capital budget our share, our town share, that sits in an active capital account. But I look after quarterly reporting to both the federal and provincial government through the Transfer Payments Ontario portal. And each quarter where we do these reports, we submit the expenses, those claims to date, and we're promptly reimbursed so that we don't have to worry about cash flow problems. We're not carrying $5 million and then waiting for a repayment check at the end of the exercise. So it is fairly routine, and we have no concerns or issues at that.
That's fair for me. Thanks very much. Anything further? We're prepared to call that question with great excitement. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. Consideration of committee minutes, various committee minutes, primarily from March of this year. Councillor Parker, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gilvezi, that council receives the Tillsonburg 150 committee minutes of March 1st, 2022, the Recreation and Sports Advisory Committee minutes of March 9th, 2022, and the Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of March 8th, 2022 as information.
Thank you. Councillor Parker. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. Is there any notice of motion to be brought forward at a subsequent meeting? Councillor Esseltine, please.
Sorry, just a... Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion I'd like to bring forward at our next meeting of council. And it would read that plans be put in place for council members and staff to return to the council chambers for regularly scheduled council meetings as soon as possible. As per the procedural bylaw, a hybrid option will continue to be available for individuals who are unable to attend in person, citing health or distance concerns. Should Southwestern Public Health issue regulations requiring in-person public meetings to cease because of COVID-19, councillors and staff regularly attending in person will return to the full hybrid option for the required period of time specified by public health. Could I speak to this, please, Mr. Mayor?
No, but it's excellent, and I'm sure you can speak to it at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And bring a seconder, and I'm sure it'll be very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other notice of motions to be brought forward at a subsequent meeting? And thank you very much, Councillor Esseltine, for the notice. That puts the notice in the motion. We're up to bylaws. Councillor Esseltine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, moved by myself. I just have to get on the right page here.
Councillor Rosehart.
Yep, seconded by Councillor Rosehart, that a bylaw to regulate traffic and the parking of motor vehicles and a bylaw to amend bylaw 2021-127 to provide a schedule of fees for certain municipal applications, services, and permits be read for a first, second, third, and final reading, and that the mayor and the clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign the same and place the corporate seal thereunto.
Thank you. Discussion on the bylaws. Call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. And confirmation bylaw for this evening's meeting 2022-028. Councillor Luciani, please.
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Esseltine that the bylaw 2022-028 to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on March 28th, 2022 be read for a first, second, third, and final reading, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign the same and place the corporate seal thereunto.
Thank you, Councillor Luciani. Discussion, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. Are there any items that members of council, the leadership team would like to bring to the attention of the public before we adjourn? Councillor Gavesi and then Councillor Parker.
Thank you. I have a few things ringette related. So there was the last couple of weeks and the weekend were very busy. So firstly, the Dorchester Dragons U14 won a silver medal at provincials in Ottawa over the March break. There are 4 players that reside in Tillsonburg that play on that team, as well as coaching staff. So congrats on their silver medal. Congratulations also to the U12 Twister Ringette team who brought home the gold. They actually won that yesterday. The U10 Ringette team finished with the provincial silver medal. Congratulations to the U10s. And finally, in provincial ringette action, the U14s won a silver medal in a nail biter score of 4-3 yesterday. So congratulations to the girls on their silver medal, and a special shout out to a special someone to me, Kate, for her win. Thank you.
Councillor Parker, please.
Yeah, first, as you can tell, I'm wearing purple today. Yesterday was Epilepsy Awareness Day. So it was Wear Purple Day. I decided to move it to today. So just acknowledging that. And further, I'd like to send congratulations out to a number of teams from Tillsonburg Minor Hockey. The under 11, under 13 teams both won their Southern Counties divisions and will be headed to the OMHA Championship tournament this weekend coming up, as well as the under 18 boys and the under 18 girls. They will be headed to the OMHA and OWHA championships a week from Friday. So congratulations to all the local teams, and thank you for representing Tillsonburg proudly.
Further business before council this evening? Just prior to concluding, I did want to reach out, share and encourage members of the public if they have an opportunity to safely now get out and visit the Annandale House National Historic Site. It was very creative and impactful Tillsonburg 150 exhibit in the Pratt Gallery. There's some, it was just extremely well put together. So we thank the team at Annandale House, the volunteers that support it, the contributors who brought some of the artifacts and the history for the community to share. So I just thought it was extremely well done. And to members of the public, check it out in person or go on at tillsonburg.ca and find out where times and opportunities are available. So those are the balance of the comments for this evening. Our next regularly scheduled council meeting, which is also council and planning, is actually not till the 19th of April. We have a deferral of a week because of a Good Roads Conference, and then for an extra day because of Easter Monday, I believe. So 19th of April at 6 o'clock is the next time council will be sitting in a organized public session. And I'll look towards Councillor Rosehart for a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Blazey, that the council meeting of March 28, 2022 be adjourned at 9:22 p.m. Thank you.
You're always ahead of us, Councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution's carried. Thanks, everyone, leadership team, council, our guests this evening, and please stay safe.